once he
People
unmutes the
can
stream.
join in.
There we go.
Link not linked yet. Not linked yet.
Michelle, can
Okay.
how are you linking it to them? Is there anything we can?
Eventbrite. Again, I'm still working on making sure that the embed is working.
Also, just Jacqueline said in the chat, we can see you, but we can't hear anything.
Oh, I just unmuted everyone.
People can join in. There we go.
Okay, what's up, guys? Welcome to the stream. Sorry the captions are a little small, but on YouTube, fun fact, if you go to the bottom right settings, there is a closed captions. I think they can live caption everything for those who want to read. But we will be starting very soon. Hope you guys are doing well. We do appreciate your patience. Sorry for the little bit of what do they call it? A rocky road? The ice cream flavor. No live captions? YouTube's behind the times, man. But I'll try my best to vocally be clear and concise for those who are willing to hear my voice, as well as my co-host, Cam Wiles. I like to say that we have reader's voice. Smooth. Kind of jazz-like even. Stand up. All right, Jacqueline. It's been a minute since I last seen you. But tell you what. All right, I don't have to do stand up. But tell you what, though, we have our boy Larry coming in to introduce the design exhibition. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm so excited for the show. I hope everyone's ready and just as excited as I am to share some cool knowledge and new perspectives in life. So, see you in a bit. I'm going to introduce you guys to my boy Larry.
Hi, sorry for all the technical difficulties, but welcome to the Micro Macro Live panel. I'm Larry Paskirk. I'm one of the designers that's part of this team. We are a group of third-year industrial designers from OCAD University. Before we begin, we would like to recognize that OCAD University and many of us from Micro Macro are situated on the ancestral lands of the Dish with One Spoon territory and Treaty 13. This includes the Mississaugas of the Credit, who are part of the Anishinaabe Nation, the Wyandot Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy of Six Nations, and any other nation recorded or unrecorded. Today, Toronto is home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to be able to live, work, and create alongside them on this land. Now, you've already been introduced to them, but I would like to reintroduce our moderators for today, Kemuel and Wilson.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kemuel. Again, I am a third-year student here at OCAD University for Industrial Design, and my partner, Wilson.
Hello. My name is Wilson. I am also a third-year industrial design student, and today we're going to lead you to something wild and exciting. So first off, we want to move on to the next slide with the micro macro. Give you guys a little bit of context what's going down. Okay, a little context is pretty much micro macro. Micro is pretty much everything, all the projects going on here. We're focusing on what we call micro, which is what impacts the person individually, right? All the way to macro, which is kind of focusing on how everything around that individual's impact. So that includes the culture, the society, the city, so on and so forth. So basically, we are doing this all from our Design for Health class, with the idea prompted of how is context for design established in a world that can change overnight. Pretty much what happened with like COVID, where everyone went to quarantine and everything seemed to change rapidly. But all these projects are self-directed projects with our helps of our peers and professors, which is greatly appreciated. Thank you, Randy, for my professor. But yeah, it shows through this. I hope you guys see there's the different design opportunities everywhere, and how these students actually have their own unique view on how they tackle these opportunities in COVID-19. And now I'm going to lead off to the overview of the project with Kemuel.
Thanks, Wilson. And so what we're going to do for this presentation is we're going to go through a couple of presentations as you see some of the names for the presenters. And then after Alex, we're going to have a short break to let everyone get out of their seats, stretch, get a drink if they need to. And then we're going to come back and continue with the rest of the presentations. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end of the event. Please keep in mind that when we do have questions for each presenter, we may not get to your question, but we will have time at the end to address your question if it wasn't already noticed. So having said that, we will begin with our presenters. So Wilson, if you want to lead us into that, take it away.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, Kemuel. I see some pogs in the chat. Thank you so much for dropping some pogs. I hope you guys said a lot of W's too and some Keck W's. Right now, we're going to lead right into Rise by Yoon, a special type of app that focuses on honing your individual skill as well as collaboration with other professionals, leveling up your professional career to the next level. So let me introduce you to Yoon with his app, Rise.
All right. Thank you, Wilson, Camille, and Larry. That was a wonderful introduction. And hello, everyone. My name is June. I'm a third-year industrial design student here at OCAD. And yeah, this is the project Rise. The focus of the project is to address the personal relationship between the mental health problems and the unemployment caused by COVID. And it is the solution to regain the lost professional value. So let's get into it. Next, please. All right, just giving you a little bit of context of what's going on about this project. So 2020, it was the year that changed everything. And out of those many things that were changed, one thing that stood out to me the most was the problems and concerns of unemployment or job loss. So according to Statistics Canada, 12.4% of the Canadian workers were laid off on a monthly basis. And that has absolutely increased the consumption of alcohol and drug addiction, which ultimately led to the concerns of suicide rates. So I was asking myself, how is the form of job loss so critical to the mental health perspective, mental health for workers? And it was something that had to be concerned sort of outside of the financial perspective. So the research shows that when losing a job, it's not only the financial income that you're losing, but also the loss in like the professional values, the identity, the daily structures, the personal relationships, the professional missions and routines. And that's because when you lose a job, it disrupts their attempt to sustain consistent and positive self-image. So next slide. Yeah, so here's a deep look into, it's not clear, but look into the specific causes that affect mental health from job loss. So there's like self-doubting, negative input, having this drastic isolation, the having of anxiety feelings and second thoughts. But most importantly, what was most essential was the cause of losing professional identity, because they're evoked with the feelings of emptiness and being worthless due to losing their value entity. So from there, the needs are identified as to be able to provide them a space to maintain their professional identity, re-emerge their professional values, and help them build a consistent career with less effects from external incidents like COVID. So that gives me a question, how might we encourage laid-off workers to regain their lost professional values during the time of their recession so that they don't feel neglected? Well, next. All right, so the answer to that question is Rise. Rise is a digital product linked to LinkedIn. And apparently it is a comprehensive professional community platform that helps laid off workers to retain their professional identity during the time of the recession. So the ultimate goal of the product is to construct solidifying professional values and derive new opportunities through consistent motivation. Next. Yeah, awesome. So let's go through a bit of a prototyping here. So first we have the landing page here. Here we're just asking the basic information of the person. The users encourage use to register with LinkedIn, but they don't necessarily have to register with LinkedIn since they can still manually put it in. And this is the fundamental data of the user for the service later on. And that leads us to number 2, the user understanding, to understand the user's professionality. Here we ask the person's profession, skill sets, and professional experiences. And if you are linked, if you're linking to this your LinkedIn profile, it is automatically filled in. But again, this can be added for better information analysis. And next slide. Okay, so we have this profound data of the person. So based on this data, RISE will match you with the professional group where you belong. So for example, in this case, the person was a furniture designer. So here, the furniture designer group is highlighted on top, but on the bottom, you can also see like UX UI designers, and also there will be like design researchers, etc. And these are categorized based on the industry that these positions belong in, and they vary depending on the industries, like you see here: design, business, culinary, and services. So let's say the person has clicked on the furniture designer and joined the group. So once you join the group of your profession, there's going to be a list of activities like here, as you can see: learning, workshops, collaborations, and events, and also community and contents. And these activities essentially encourage the users to stay attached to their profession. So let's click on learning. So again, RISE is a shared platform with LinkedIn. So we do have this benefit to share materials. In this case, is the learning materials. So knowing that the user's professional characteristics by now, we match the learning materials that are suitable for the user. So here, for example, the user has an experience in using the CNC milling machine, and he's also a furniture designer. So on top, under today's lesson, here we're seeing, I'll learn how to make a chair using the CNC milling machine. So yeah, next slide. Yeah, another feature of RISE is also collaboration. So collaboration is offered based on the selected skill sets and knowledge of the user, and it is already known that RISE has identified those. It's like a digital studio where they can join their skills together to create something new or like new opportunities. So here, as you can see, this is the skill set of the person, and underneath, it's saying that there's a person looking for a experienced Rhino 3D user to create a power inverter. So let's say the person has clicked on that, and that's where the person is able to see the full project description with the information of the person that you're collaborating with. You can send a direct message to the person to let them know that you're interested, and connect with the person since it is linked to your LinkedIn profile. And next, please. All right, and also community is important. In every profession group here in the furniture, so for example, this one in the furniture designer group, there's in every profession group, there will be a community set up for all the members. So this is the common thing that we all know. They can share, like, comment, and celebrate on yours and other members' work and career developments. So once we know well enough of the person's professional characteristics, after all, RISE will link the user to external activities that will further help them to develop their profession. And they're available through third-party apps like Spotify, YouTube, Netflix, and we will directly link the person to that content that the person is willing to view. Next, please. All right, so last but not least, this is the overall page where the person has the ability to view the progress and And by having this leveling up system, it motivates the user by giving this emotional satisfaction. And the user is more encouraged to use the app and further develop themselves. And also they can view the process of their activities all at once. They can leave and come back whenever they want. And next. All right, so this is the map that shows the key characteristics and effects of Rise in all micro, meso, macro levels. So overall, Rise helps the users to sustain their professional values and identity in the most efficient way possible, while provoking natural motivation to keep themselves develop their career. And that is the end of my presentation. Next slide, please. Thank you. And if you want to see more about the project, please visit micro-macro.format.com. And if you want to see my work or you want to know about me, please visit ywcodesign.com. And thank you. Any questions are welcome.
Thank you so much, Yoon. That was absolutely amazing project. I love it so much. I have a quick question myself, actually. In which time frame do you think Rise fits itself in as to be the most efficient product, and why?
Rise was a direct response to what happened in the unemployment sort of what happened to employment status in the COVID era, and it like in the perspective of that's where the Rise suits, but it also sits in the place where it is suitable for like retired people or people that want to further develop their career or find new careers. So this does Rise, although it was a response to what happened during COVID, it doesn't necessarily tie to that. I guess I call that era of COVID, but instead it is really foreseeing what could potentially happen in people's life.
That's sick. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Kimwell?
Yeah, I mean, after hearing Yoon's project and seeing it for myself, and even after what you just said, Yoon, I think what you've put here is like a seed to grow more ideas and concepts that would follow in the same line of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is just a good way to start the ball rolling in people's minds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that'd be really helpful for me. I'd like to be some collabs over the quarantine break. But as you can see,
try Rise.
It's all about Rise, rising to the top, boo. But yeah, as you can see, that's 100% Canadian made. Next, we are moving on to the next project called Flix. This is a project done by Daniel, a project after my own heart because I love binge watching shows, right? And this is all about staying entertained with your friends in the midst of the pandemic and social distancing. Please take it away, Daniel.
All right, solid intro. Thank you, Wilson. So my name is Daniel. I'm also a third-year ID student. Flix is what I would call a digital entertainment consumption app, but also a collective experience platform. Next slide. So this project sort of started in a place of passion. I think I have a lot of passion for films and movies, and I wanted to kind of challenge how we're seeing shifts in the industry. But through the process, I kind of brought it back to a more user-centered focus. How can we provide this pastime, this hobby to people who are facing challenges during COVID? We're seeing that moviegoing is not a viable pastime, and that kind of brings two kind of issues for moviegoers. One being that we can't socialize with people, we can't go to the movies with friends, and also it's harder for people who are seeking that sense of catharsis, that escapism, to really dig into their hobby and find that kind of sense of calm and relaxation. Next slide. Yeah, so essentially in this kind of new environment, this new normal, we're seeing a lack of what I would call collective experience and sense of community. And so this project is sort of a look at how we can rethink social interaction to be more meaningful and allow people to connect a bit more effectively. And it all starts with this question of how can digital entertainment consumption facilitate meaningful connection? Next. In developing the concept, I kind of just went with two very basic user profiles. Obviously, movie audiences are very diverse, so this is kind of like a simple breakdown of the kind of people you'll see at the theater. The first is a passive moviegoer, what one might call an introvert of sorts. This is someone who prioritizes the pure movie experience and is maybe not so focused on the social aspects. Someone who's more comfortable going to the movies alone, for example, even before the pandemic. And the active moviegoer is someone who might be labeled as an extrovert, someone who goes to the movies with friends, seeks that socially engaged experience, and wants to have that level of interaction. Obviously, these terms are oversimplifications, and as you'll see later, it's kind of a description of two ends of a spectrum, which sort of allow us to explore and further define the people who are being impacted by this project. Next. So I've sort of drawn up this immersion awareness chart, so to speak. Through my research, I found that there's a lot of emphasis on immersion within the story, but there's also a certain level of impact from being aware of the crowd and being aware of that collective presence, which impacts a user's experience. So user A might find themselves more on the top left side of this graph of sorts, where they value high immersion in the story and in the experience, but they might not be as impacted by being part of a crowd. And user B will find themselves on the other end of the niche, user B will find themselves in the niche on the other end of the spectrum, where they value immersion as well, but they also feel more impacted by this crowd awareness. And so obviously a lot of viewers will find themselves sort of somewhere within this spectrum, or they might identify differently depending on the situation. But we're seeing that there's this connection between collective experiences and satisfaction when it comes to movie-going experiences. Next. So this is kind of a lot of stuff, but basically it's just a comparative analysis with different market competitors. We're seeing Teleparty sort of blew up this year, where it's like a screen share platform for streaming services. Big Screen VR is a VR cinema experience, essentially, where you watch movies through your VR headset, and then of course the actual physical cinema. What Flix brings differently from these different platforms is a balance of accessibility and immersive experience. So Teleparty is very accessible. Anyone with a browser and with internet can download and use it, of course, but it is not as socially connected or immersive. You're talking through chat boxes. You're not interacting with the people you're watching with. Big Screen VR is a more immersive platform, but there are a lot of accessibility issues as far as price point and technological know-how. And then cinema, of course, would be the ultimate immersive experience, as we know in general, but convenience is an issue, as well as we're seeing now, health issues and logistics. Next. And all of this sort of brings us to Flix. This is a little, just like a pretty marketing slide for you guys. Next slide. Flix is basically set up like your typical movie-going app. Oh, I think these slides are actually a little bit different than what I had, but that's okay. You kind of browse through your movies. You can search out films that you're looking to watch. This create event thing here in the middle is what I'll expand on later. That's a unique feature to Flix. But of course, like a lot of social media apps, you'll also see an activities channel and a profile, which also has new features that I'll touch on later. Next slide. So as far as creating an event, what Flix brings that something like Netflix or HBO Go might not is the creation of scheduled public viewing rooms, essentially screenings. Sort of like you would go to a cinema and sit in the theater. You can pick a time, you can pick a film, you can invite people, you can create public or private screenings where people can come and join. And this allows for a real-time collective shared experience for all the people who might be interested in whatever film you're showing. It also allows this platform to work with distribution companies who might be looking to release films but are seeing that cinemas are no longer viable. We're seeing this a lot now. Warner Bros. Has recently said that they're going to release all their films from this year, I think it was to the digital platform, and that's going to continue, trending. So this is sort of a way to bridge those two worlds in a sense, and provide viewers with a more accessible form of watching the films. Next. So these are three sort of features of Flix. So the first one, of course, are Flix. It's a little bit different from the title, but essentially Flix are sort of like a live reaction to the movie that you're watching. When you're watching the film, and if you feel some sort of visceral reaction, if you want to laugh, if you want to cry, if you want to make a joke, you can record yourself reacting and then post it live, and then everyone in that room, in that theater, will be able to see how you're feeling, what kind of emotions you're expressing. Echoes are sort of just the equivalent of sharing when you echo someone's flick, you let all your other friends see it, and it's kind of spreads that that reaction, makes it more prominent. And then of course reacts are just, I think we're all familiar with that concept, just a more explicit way of communicating with different people, rather than a like or a thumbs up. Next. And then of course, all of this is present in what I like to call a Flix stream. So this is where everything sort of happens. Essentially, when you're watching a film, whether with a friend or just by yourself, if you're in a public or private viewing or screening room, you can hit this sort of smiley face button here and then record your reaction. It'll go straight into this scrolling sort of stream here. No editing, no cutting, none of that stuff. And then people can react to it, promote it, and it'll also be then pinned to specific scenes in the film. So if you want to go back and watch it afterward, you can kind of see like the reaction as it happens, the same way you might hear in a theater, but without that sort of level of intrusion, so to speak. I think this is the wrong set of slides, but from there, like this is pretty much how this app or how this platform works. Oh no, it's there. Perfect, awesome. Yeah, okay. So basically, this project is a look at a new mode of communication and interaction. It's not only a way to bring movies to people, but also a way to connect people in a time where we're seeing the rise of digital and virtual means, but also a lack of physical interaction. And while I think that technology and digital entertainment are going to continue developing, continue innovating, it's important to think about these social implications and how they will sort of impact how we live or who we are in a sense. And so I wanted to leave a question for you guys, the viewers, the chat. Do you see these ideas, both my project, anybody else's project today, as some sort of temporary remedy, some kind of impermanent solution, or are we looking at new avenues and a reimagined human experience? Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Wow, that was what a way to end it, Daniel. Thank you for that awesome project. I actually wanted to bring a question to you since we didn't have any questions at the moment from chat, but I want to bring a question to you about this app as well. For you, does an app like the one you just presented help you anticipate the return of in-person movie screenings with friends and family and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the issues that I was looking at the beginning of this project was how cinemas were dying just in general. We were seeing lower attendance rates. A lot of cinemas were shutting down. Of course, COVID was sort of like a fast track to the death of cinema, but I think everyone who has a passion for film wants to see it come back. But we're sort of fighting this convenience technology boom, which is so pervasive. It's in everything. It's beyond cinema. It's everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So while I think that definitely this would be like a good way to kind of bring film back as a pastime and maybe promote the idea of cinemas, I think it might also find its place as a sort of substitute and a way to sort of phase out from physical means of consuming films and maybe into something that's virtual. I do think that this is not a design that's particularly meant to last in its first iteration. It would probably translate into some kind of AR or VR platform and add to that level of immersion and connectivity, and maybe replace cinemas on some level, because I think it'll be hard for studios and companies to recover. And although I hope they do, I think it'll be an interesting shift.
Awesome. Awesome.
Check chat. Thank you. Yeah, see if I can just read this here. Macro. Yeah, I think, well, I find that on a micro level, this speaks to something like we're facing a lot of issues beyond like health issues and economic issues. A lot of people rely on film as a means of I don't know, de-stressing as a form of therapy, almost like a kind of cinema therapy, right? And so I think on a micro level, a lot of people might depend on this kind of hobby to sort of, I'm not finding the words, to escape the stress, really, to recover on a personal level, right? And so I think as far as micro, that is a particular impact on the person. Extending to macro, I feel like then we're talking about how interaction holds value within our lives, and how that is changing as we see things shift technologically, but also socially. I mean, like if you think, like I'm sure you're familiar with how like Twitch has blown up this past year, right? And a lot of people are
100%.
looking at live streams and stuff, and so we're seeing a shift in how people want to interact with each other and how people want to consume entertainment and media. And I think that's sort of like the more broader scope of issues that this project touches on. And I do think that on some level they are intertwined. But yeah, I would say that this project is sort of focused on, or outwardly focused on like the meso rather than the micro and the macro, but I do think that it extends to encompass all of those things. That's
Yeah, that's perfect. Sorry, just to give a little context to the viewers, I was muted for a quick minute. You just giving more context on how his project impacts micro level to macro level. Actually, there's also a few more questions. If Kamel, you want to answer them, or I mean, bring them up to him, not answer them.
Yeah. We have one question in the chat that was asking, how will this compare to other streaming services? Would it be a paid subscription?
So this is the way I imagine this in practice would be that it would connect to your existing streaming services. So I didn't include in the presentation, but this is an idea of like remote movie viewing. Essentially, the app would act as a way to socialize remotely with others, but also to control your TV or whatever. You could connect with your screen, have it playing on that screen, and then react from your phone. As far as like a paid sub, I can't say I went into this idea thinking about profit margins, but I will say that maybe if the app expands to include other sort of more social media type interactions or Twitch type things, then I guess there could be some level of paid subscription system. But I think the idea was that it would connect to and interact with your existing subscriptions and work with those kinds of companies.
Perfect. Thank you so much for answering questions. Sorry, we can't answer any more questions, but please save those
I can
questions
answer
at
in
the
chat.
end. Yeah, so the chat, don't worry, we'll round out your questions
I'll
at
type
the
them out.
end.
I'll type them out. Yeah.
Yeah, if anything, you can type it out too. So stay tuned. All right, Kevin, all you.
Awesome. Thank you, Wilson. Thank you, Daniel. Next up, we have Larry, who is going to present his project, which is called the Yellow Staircase. It is a project that I think will really engage every user, but for those of us from OCAD, I think this will uh, come as something near to our hearts, seeing as we're no longer in the building. So, Larry, have a go. Enjoy.
Thank you. So yeah, I was just mentioned. This project is kind of based around OCAD specifically. So coming into this assignment where it's very open-ended, I knew I wanted to start working something related to mental health. Oops. Since the onset of COVID, because that's been a very big problem, especially for many university and college age students. So I started out more broad and eventually narrowed it to the OCAD community specifically. So looking into mental health, the pandemic, things like that, I found that one detail that was missing is a sense of community, um, now, especially in a pandemic, but even before, as with commuter schools like OCAD, students are very disconnected. There's a lot of disconnect, especially between the disciplines. So how might we create a community environment for OCAD during periods of online-only learning in order to decrease isolation experienced by students? And I'm sure I'm not the only student who has felt especially disconnected from other students in classes recent semesters, or has trouble reaching out to people online the same way you would in person. So I wanted to see what sort of things do I really want to come out of my project in different ways. So I used micro, meso, macro to kind of examine what do I want to happen? What possibilities do I want to explore? And I found things, aside from just decreasing isolation, students don't have the same outlets that we had previously at a design school. It's quite a different experience online. And one of the things that made it such a different experience, I'm going to just skip ahead a little bit, is the yellow staircase. So for those who are unfamiliar with OCAD, there are numerous colored staircases running through the building. And the yellow staircase is the main one, connecting the older lower building to the new Sharp Center, which is the box on stilts in the sky. This staircase is entirely lined with artwork, graffiti. If you can imagine it, someone has probably drawn it on the wall. So when I was going through my some of my process, I was looking at how are students now, one, transitioning in and out of school experiences like online classes, online events for clubs, things like that. And I found that social media is used a lot by students, but it's so hard to condense the community into one place. It's spread out so far. So what I wanted to do was bring this yellow staircase into the digital in a way to bring together OCAD students. So this went through a few iterations as the needs and my wants out of this project changed. I first was thinking about accessibility, so using existing platforms like Instagram. Um, then it shifted into more of a, what if we could provide a separate social platform altogether, moving more into where it is now. So this is the yellow staircase. It is an augmented reality experience where you are able to climb the yellow staircase from the comfort of your home and connect with other students in a space that is now removed from us. So similar to, well, uh, similar to other apps that use AR, you can move around with your phone to change the way you're looking. So you can look 360 degrees by turning around. You can climb the stairs by swiping. You can zoom in and out to see pictures more clearly. And you can add to the wall, which is a highlight for many students. I wanted to try and use a similar system to, say, Instagram stories or Snapchat, so that it would be familiar for students and would make it the easiest way to add onto the wall. So this means that you can add pictures, you can write, you can draw. It's really up to you. So thank you. This is my hope for OCAD, although it is quite a ways away.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, Larry, for the awesome project. I really do miss the yellow staircase though in the OCAD. It's like this app kind of reminds me of Google Streets View, but like stair view, right? Yeah, I think it's really cool. I can see this like being implemented in Google Maps even to be interactive, like next level interaction on the streets.
It would really be like at the beginning of this semester, I went on to OCAD's website to look at their virtual tour. And honestly, if they had a Google Maps set up something like this where you can go in and walk around OCAD, that would be a much better representation of what the community really is.
Yeah, I really think so too, actually. Speaking of which, like I even thought of like, have you thought about adding GIFs or videos or that stuff like that nature onto the walls?
Yeah, so that's one of the exciting things that this app provides that isn't an opportunity you have in person is adding more interactive elements like GIFs or videos where people can then go in and watch your video on the wall. Yeah, absolutely. That would be a huge advantage one and just benefit.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We got some pogs in the chat. People responding very well to the concept and idea. And thank you for being so soft spoken. I love it. I can listen to your voice all day. Anyways, thank you so much, Lawrence. We're gonna move on to the next one now, which is Joseph with his virtual rec room, which is really cool because I'd be down to play some games with the boys and girls on like with my classmates and all that. I think that'd be a lot of fun. So quick recap. Unfortunately, Joseph is busy, cannot be here, but he has sent us a recording which we'll be playing right now. Thank you for the pogs in chat. I appreciate that.
Good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you're viewing this from in the world. My name is Joseph. I'm one of the students from the Design for Health class that took place last semester. And today I'm excited to be sharing with you my project. It's called the Virtual Rec Room. So let's jump right into it. So firstly, a little bit of context. Why did I actually choose to embark on this project? Well, the last semester has looked a lot different for myself as a third-year student, as well as I know for a lot of my friends and a lot of my classmates. However, for myself, being a third-year student, I was really fortunate and blessed to have an existing network of social connections who I could rely on throughout the past semester. However, I do know that the same cannot be said for many students across the world who do not have these existing social supports and networks in place. Even as close to me as my brother, who entered into high school last year, and kind of looking from his experience and observing him, I realized that community and social supports have a huge part in the educational experience, and COVID, of course, has drastically affected this. So coming out of a place of empathy as a designer, I thought, what could actually be done to improve the student experience during these COVID times? That led me to my problem here. Essentially, social isolation and its effects on mental health, on increased stress and anxiety. I saw many reports in my research kind of breaking this down and just discussing this trend here. My research also took me into a lot of different directions. I was kind of asking myself the question of, what does the ideal educational experience look like? What does the educational experience look like now? And what can be done to reconcile the two? Kind of the key findings of my research were spaces for informal interactions, where students can kind of speak out and be comfortable and just be themselves, how this ties into social supports and friendships, and how all of this kind of benefits education and a student's academic performance. And actually, lastly, interestingly, my research took a turn. I found that the gaming community actually kind of already has all of these variables in place. For example, Animal Crossing, which really took off during the COVID pandemic. There are multiple reports here that kind of analyze the game and its effects on learning and students' academic performance during the pandemic. And what's really interesting is the gaming community, it kind of loops all of these things together and forms spaces ripe for social interaction and friendships to take place. But of course, don't take it from myself. This is just one of the many quotes and people who I kind of mentioned and researched in my research. But I found that her quote here really puts together really nicely, summarizes it really nicely. She says here, haven't made any friends yet. Of course, there are groups, but it's easy to feel awkward and you really have to put yourself out there. And interestingly here, she also mentions gaming in the last part of her quote, which I found really interesting. My class has seen this many times throughout the course of the semester, but what I found was essentially what I'm trying to do is bridge the gap between these formal and informal class and social interactions. For many students, the year just looks like formal class interactions, answering questions, meeting with people because they have to. In order to bridge the gap into the informal interactions, which have a lot of positive effects, as you can see here on these sticky notes, it takes initiative and a lot more work. So I thought, how might we make it a little bit more accessible and a bit more enjoyable for students to bridge this gap? Kind of translating this into how might I want to minimize anxiety and making connections online. I want interactions to look a lot more natural. How might we promote informal peer-to-peer interaction? Again, informal interaction spaces that lead to the formation of lasting relationships. And of course, incorporating successful elements of the in-person experience into the digital and virtual realm. And doing competitive analysis, kind of looking at different communities present with games, kind of gluing the social activity together. I wanted to kind of have my design be very easily accessible. And what I noticed was these physical rec rooms, they actually have a really nice blend. They've got a really nice blend between group-based and individual interaction. And they're way on this end of the spectrum where they're easily accessible to students. In a university space, you would just walk right in and it's very easy to meet people individually or in groups. And I thought that was a massive positive. And this is exactly the type of informal interaction space that I wanted to replicate in the digital realm. Again, we have here Discord channels and Facebook games, but again, they're more leaning towards either group-based or individual interactions. They're primed for those kind of interactions to take place. And on this side of the spectrum, you've got these games and these communities, such as Animal Crossing that I've mentioned. However, you've got to, as a student, you've got to invest money and time, and this limits how accessible the game can actually be and its positive effects on students. And a concept that we've discussed throughout the course of this semester is this concept of intersectionality, where we kind of look at, the biases that we have in place and that form the intersection of how we think and how we design, and also recognizing that many people might not have the same things or have the same experiences that we do. And of course, for some people, having Animal Crossing, it might seem like nothing, but to some people, the cost and the time might render the benefits of this game out of the scope. So kind of with all of these in mind, I've designed a solution that integrates into a learning management system, abbreviated as LMS. The one we're using at OCAD is called Canvas, so I designed around that. But essentially here, the core concept is simple. There's a space, a virtual rec room for students to hang out, built into this learning management system. So some of the benefits for students, currently this, of course, we don't have a virtual rec room on there. This is a new design that I'm proposing. So for students, firstly, it's just a space where they can hang out away from the stresses of school. You've got spontaneous and planned interaction, kind of what is present in physical recreation rooms. You've got, you tell a friend, let's go meet up at the rec room at 4 p.m. You can also go in there and kind of play a game with someone, and the game kind of serves as a mediator between the interaction, and which makes it non-awkward. So I've also tried to implement this facet into my design. You've also got group-based and individual interaction, a really nice blend in between the two, and you'll see this as I walk you through the prototype in a bit. It's also very easily accessible, being integrated into the learning management system. You don't have to go out of your way to download anything or install anything. It's free. It's already there. You can just hop right into a game and play with a friend or someone you don't know. You've also got social media and groups integrations. Very easy to share your information if you want to with the appropriate people. And of course, for educators as well, it fosters closeness. It allows students to build networks. And of course, this is non-awkward, which is the huge beauty to it. And also, as a result, all of this translates into better class engagement and performance. So in conclusion, the virtual rec room is the best way to meet others online. I like to say this as my tagline here, but it's easy, it's fun, it's accessible, and now it's non-awkward as well. And down here, these are just some of the possibilities of integrations with other learning management systems. You've got Brightspace, which is what my brother in high school uses. You've got Blackboard, you've got Acorn, which U of T uses. And imagine the possibilities if something like this could actually be integrated. Imagine how much students could get out of it, and educators as well. So these are just some of my references, and that's my presentation. But before we go, I just want to walk you through quickly how my prototype works. All right, so here we've got the home screen of the Canvas Rec Room. We've got some games here. We've got tournaments. On the right side, we've got game requests, so students can challenge and request to play games with each other. On the right side, we've also got recent scores and past tournaments. It's very easy to challenge people here, kind of that spontaneous interaction. As well, down here, we've got linked groups. So communities are very easily accessible to students. There's no more, how do you find so-and-so community? There's no more need to message people. Everything is all right here. As well, we've got the ability to challenge classmates here spontaneously, especially those who are online, kind of that spontaneous interaction that I've been talking about. Here, let's challenge Matthew to a game because he's active right now. So let's request a match. We can play chess together. Here, you've got the option to book with a calendar or actually send an instant invitation to a game match. So let's send that invitation. Wait for Matthew to join. Here he is. We can actually talk in the chat while we wait and kind of just get to meet one another and get to know one another a little bit. And the game here, of course, is serving as a mediator, so it's not awkward. When it's comfortable and we feel comfortable, we can actually very easily share social links with one another here. And, of course, enjoy the game together. Unfortunately here, Matthew won. We can continue the chat here, or we can rematch or play another game together. But as far as we've actually built a social connection right here. And now we know a little bit more about Matthew, and we've connected with him on social. And the game here has served its purpose, and we'll look forward to another game together. All right, so here we are on the home screen once again. This time we're going to take a look at tournaments. As you can see, we've got right here, there are various community building events we have in place that help foster community. However, this time we're going to start a tournament. And let's create a private tournament. And because we know Matthew now, let's invite him to a match with some more players. We're going to play solitaire this time. And let's see if everyone is online. And this is how the game works. And of course, this is just like what's available on a one-on-one match. We've still got the social link sharing, and it's very easy to talk to one another and connect over a game. So this is how the tournament works. All right, so we've reached the end of my presentation here. Thank you very much for tuning in, for listening. It's my hope that you've taken something valuable away from this talk. If you'd like to know more about this project or about the work that I do, or even check out the interactive prototype that I've built, you can
Sorry, it's freezing.
visit my designer page on Format.
It's freezing a bit, so
If you'd like to visit Joseph's work, visit our website.
That's right. So Joseph's work and portfolio will all be linked later in the comment section below. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for the gamers. Rise up. We love gamers. Me and Camel are actually gamers. Let's go, Camwell.
Yes, sir. That is so true.
Yes, sir. Anyways, thank you for the wonderful comments, and the pods will be sending that forward and questions to Joseph, and he will respond to you guys later via DMs or so on and so forth. And next, we actually have Face to Face by Alexander, with a project focused on promoting relationships in a time where there is not a lot of relationship intimacy, like a lot of face-to-face activity. So we'll let Alex take care of the rest. Go ahead, Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex, like my colleagues. Thanks for the introduction, guys. Also, thanks for everyone who's listening and your patience with our technical difficulties. That being said, I am also a third-year student. I'm not sure if my video is showing up. Yes, now it is. My project is face-to-face. It is the result of research into how the pandemic has and continues to affect cohabitating couples. The interest in this focus stemmed from seeing friends of mine struggle facing increased tension as a result of shifts from working to home, navigating new routines, a lack of privacy in apartment, a small apartment often, both physical and emotional, and maybe differences becoming more apparent through the course of prolonged isolation. Next. So it became clear through my research that I felt like there was a space for innovation in promoting resilience in relationships through periods of external stress and unforeseen challenge, attempting to address needs for separation, communication, and improved empathy. I explored three different directions. The first here is a sort of communicative room divider that would create needed space for focused work, but also allow for passive communication of mood and needs. Another was an app that would allow users to indirectly communicate emotional state and their needs while offering some context and support. A third on, I guess, the right there, is a persona empathy game where players or each individual in the couple would work together to build mutual problem-solving skills and develop empathy for fictional personas, which then may indirectly relate back to their own relationship. Next. a key part of the process was investigating both the micro needs and interactions of the users and how that fit into a larger picture. So here you can see an exploration that I took into understanding who I was solving for, and the criteria, which ultimately led to criteria for the future design or the design intervention. Research demonstrates that external crises, such as the current ongoing pandemic and associated economic and social challenges, increase stress. And this can amplify existing personal vulnerabilities and maladaptive behavior, both personal and interpersonal. In order to maintain well-being within a relationship, it's important for couples to contextualize the effects of external stress, both for themselves and of their partner. Another key aspect is to maintain communication, which can be increasingly difficult when access to support is reduced. Next. My research question became, how might we foster empathy and increase face-to-face communication for couples experiencing relationship tension as a result of external crisis in order to promote resilient relationships? Next. There's been a documented rise in domestic violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. And to me, this, I think, really illustrates the fact that there's been a broader breakdown in adaptive behavior for couples, and domestic violence being the extreme, necessary to avoid extreme end of the spectrum. And these skills, both communication and context, are important to sort of solving that challenge for couples. And ultimately, the implication being that a supportive relationship can actually help individuals to cope and thrive during periods of external crisis. So not only would it improve relationship quality and stem violent behavior, it would also improve individual well-being. This is the space that the app I designed, Face-to-Face, seeks to occupy. The project has broader relevance than solely the current pandemic, as well as research suggests that outbreaks and environmental disasters, which could cause similar stress on relationships, will become more frequent in coming years. Next. I took the opportunity of our distanced study reality to focus my energy on exploring how digital solutions could address these needs. So here you can see the progress of various wireframes of apps looking at ways to promote communication and context. Initially, the focus was on sort of a subtle expression of needs based on an initial concept that I showed earlier. This I ended up moving away from because through research I found that direct communication is actually a key piece of the challenge. So I sort of ended up tailoring the app more to that direction. Next. And so these are some of the UI of my final prototype, focusing on how digital innovation could improve physical connection and well-being. Face-to-Face is designed to promote mutual understanding and conflict resolution through guided check-ins, tailored external resources, and constructive discussion. So I moved away from subtle and moved toward the direct. Next. And the direct aspect that I built in is focused on turning mobile devices from a point of disengagement within relationship into a constructive and positive opportunity for resolution. So doing the idea being the phone acts as sort of a moderator and has the function of locking out a user, thereby demanding in some way they connect face to face and build resolution. And that can be guided, and there are modules for doing so, but proximity being required is a key feature of the app. Next. And I think these are some key elements I just wanted to highlight. So checking in is an important part of building context and perspective. So that's one thing. Creating time and physical space for communication, like I just spoke about, making sure that couples get the opportunity to talk in person in order to build resolution. And this also helps to foster mutual decision making. So until both individuals have felt that resolution, the app remains sort of in control of the phone is the concept, thereby requiring users to find that resolution. That being said, it is also there to provide solutions and resources to help couples build healthy habits in those moments of potential conflict or disagreement, so that in the end they can build that resolution. Next. And I think I think that's pretty much it. These are just some screens demonstrating a check-in capability where you sort of explore your context further, which is a key piece that I discovered through research to help build mutual understanding. And also I think that plays into being able to understand how you're progressing, both yourself and your partner. And so the progress tab here sort of illustrates goals you set for yourself or that are suggested by the app for things like how many in-person discussions you've had or how many outside actions you're taking to improve your relationship health. And then making sure that it's a bilateral, like both parties are involved. So I think that's kind of it. If there are any questions, I'd love to answer them.
That is a great presentation. I love everything about that one.
Awesome.
Let's move on.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex, for that awesome presentation. Wilson, did you have something to say? You look like you were muted for a moment.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted for a quick minute, but I was gonna say that was a great project. Thank you. That was really detailed. I really enjoyed that one. Especially with what's happening nowadays, as you said, right? With everyone staying at home, talking to their families or talking to their significant other. Or if they can't see them, this is a great way to go about it. Yeah, and oh, sorry, go on.
I think it's important, like you say, I think the broader context, I mean, it could even be expanded to include other interpersonal relationships like families. I focused on couples just because they have sort of a unique place in the current context in terms of the rise in domestic violence. I think a lot of buzz gets put on also divorce rates increasing in some places, which point to the fact that it's important. It's an important thing to address. So yeah.
And so, yeah, Wilson, I want to know what your thoughts are. As part of this project and even someone that's been through development of your own. How do you see this being a benefit for everyone that is going through the pandemic right now?
I think, well, before I tell you what I think, I want to answer a question from the chat first. We can relate back to our thing. Jacqueline has
for sure.
asked, what separates this app from other couples app, therapy app?
Yeah, so I did look at sort of what's out there for couples. There are things, a lot of couple therapy that is app-based, which allows, which suggest plans over the course of, say, a couple months to years of how to build these sort of skills. But they often, or I think overall, I didn't find any that bridge the gap between the digital space and the physical space. It was all suggestive or up to you to sort of guide your own journey together. And I think where face-to-face stands out in one respect is bridging that gap and taking ownership of the phone to become a place of connection rather than an opportunity for disengagement. Which I think a lot of people these days could resonate with them, that phones take a lot of energy and sometimes actually pull us away from those we love. And this app sort of is different from competitors in that regard. Yeah, I think that would be the key difference, bridging that gap and providing context. I guess the second thing is providing context of how an ongoing pandemic, say, affects personal well-being and the relationship, because I think that's something that's also kind of undiscussed at this point, relating, say, the traumas or stresses associated with the pandemic and how that's affecting yourself and the relationship. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Fantastic. I hope that answers the question, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for the question. And thank you, Hitsukuya, for the great presentation, Pog. You nailed it, Alex. We'll be moving on to the next thing, which is a break. Take a Kit Kat. Take a break, my friends. Go get some water. Get some coffee. Me and Ken will be here to chill a little bit. You guys want to say anything in the chat or hang out a little bit? But we'll be back in, I believe, how long?
About 5 to 10 minutes, I think.
Five, 10
let's
minutes?
say 5:50.
All right, we'll be back on 5:50. If you guys want to talk in the chat, feel free to. We'll be here. Kamel, you can go for a drink if you want, or we can just sit here and chill and talk.
For sure. So let's come back at 5:50 and regroup for the rest of the presentations.
Perfect. All right, guys, enjoy the break. All right, so I'm gonna be chilling here. Kamel, you can chill here, or you can get water.
I'm gonna get water real quick.
All right, you go get water. Stay hydrated. So what do you guys think about the presentation so far, chat? I hope you guys are enjoying the presentation. I know we had a little bumpy start, but hey, I think it's going quite smoothly now. I think we are having a good time.
Thank you for jumping in here, Wilson, and saving the day with your streaming capabilities.
No worries, no worries. But yeah,
why don't you take this opportunity, if you're going to hang out? What, you guys have a podcast, or you do a little self-promotion?
Sure. If you actually, yeah. Why not? All right. Quick little snippet. If you guys want to see some nice juicer content, right? This is my boy Kamel's, our co-host. In the chat, that's his Twitch stream. Feel free to drop him a follow. He's a funny guy. He's a great guy. He's a man of God, even. I dare to say. He's just a holy man. I love him. He's my king. I will sing for him any day, any week of the day. Thank you for the dabs. God damn these hands. I am loving it. Thank you so much, man. But if you want to follow, I also stream every now and then for fun. If you want to see some POG content. Sorry, there's so many things going on my computer right now. That's my Twitch channel. Drop a follow you like. All up to you. But yeah, how
You guys have a podcast together, or no? You're
Oh no, that one's on break at the moment.
oh, okay. Yeah, too many things in the air.
Too many things in the air. Thank you, Alex. Alex, are you sticking around?
Yeah, I have nowhere else to be.
Perfect. Yo, Alex, okay. What do you think of the other projects so far? I want to hear your perspective as a student because we kind of work side by side we work side by side together in this class, right? Like we got to saw
Yeah.
like everything from the beginning to start. Like, what do you think?
I think what's been really cool is to see, like you say, the progress, but starting from the same point and how diverse the directions people have taken have been. And I think that's important because it follows people's interests, and or what they've experienced in terms of changes associated with the pandemic. I think it's interesting to see each person pull something out that's maybe in some way related to their own experience. I think that's very that's been one cool aspect.
That is really cool. It's true. We got a question from Wrong Michelle Wilson. What was your term project about? Mine, I'm not presenting today, but mine was about helping disabled gamers with different types of controllers as people needed. Well, as kids with disabilities tend to stay home more and without external help, a lot of parents kind of turn to gaming for the kids' attention and to keep them busy, pretty much, right? And that was what my project was about. Maybe I'll show it sometime on my portfolio. But yeah. Thank you for the pod.
I think once again that kind of illustrates the fact that you honed in on something that you are sort of interested in some way.
Yeah.
Like the gaming aspect.
Yeah, for me, I'm a big gamer. I love playing games. Alex, do you actually play any games?
No, I feel like I don't really have time at the moment.
True.
And I'm actually across the country at the moment, on the West Coast. So I feel like I've been moving around so much that I don't really have a setup. And I feel like for gaming, it seems like you guys all have microphones, and I don't have a TV even. So.
Wait, where are you? You're in Vancouver, British Columbia?
Yeah.
No way. That's where.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, that's where I'm from, and
Yeah.
so I guess when school is all online, which is odd, I guess, but being able to go to school in Toronto from Vancouver or wherever. We have colleagues who are in what's the farthest you can think of? Korea.
Yeah.
And
that was a struggle. That one, I'm not gonna lie, no cap. That one takes a little bit more effort to link up with your friends and group mates. Are 12 hours difference, but we made it work, and we still got. I'm pretty happy with the results I got so far with my group members. But I didn't know you're from Vancouver because I'm from Vancouver too. Well, I used to live there way back when. So yeah.
And you moved with your family to Toronto?
Yeah. My dad got bored of Vancouver and he wanted to move to Toronto just for that reason alone.
Okay.
Which is weird to me because I was enjoying Vancouver very much so as a high schooler. Let's see here. Wrong Michelle. Link up with Eric. I can't pronounce his last name. He used to be into. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. Okay. I'll look him up. See what he's saying. Maybe we can make something together. So Alex, actually, I was curious. So what is your design process when you thought of your project? Because you went really deep into it. It almost felt personal, which is like really cool and all, but it was really dope. So I was wondering like, what was the inspiration come from, or just the process in general?
Yeah, I think I sort of touched on it, but early in the pandemic, I witnessed a couple of my friends really struggling in their relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And that came down to things like differences becoming more exaggerated, lack of space. Like, I think one thing that came through from a bunch of different friends of mine is that this lack of spontaneity that's part of life now. Like they they were saying they had nothing fresh to give each other, but also then wouldn't talk about it. So it ended up for one of my friend couple.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call them.
Whatever it is.
They actually separated. So it sort of ended up being inspiration in some way for me to try and see what sort of ways could help. And I think that led to looking at, ways to understand context as part of it, but then also build empathy and communication. Yeah.
Damn.
And then I guess it was helpful. You were wanting a process.
Yeah.
So I took that kernel and sort of, I guess we all are encouraged to explore quite broad, and then eventually find something within all our exploration that kind of fits our interest, and bring it back down to something that's more focused. And that's kind of actually was the inspiration for, or part of the inspiration for the title of our session here, Micro Macro, is that we are both looking at the small interactions of users within a larger context. And I think on a personal level, that's part of how the process unfolded as well. Looking quite broad at many different applications or ways to address an issue, and then focusing back in on a specific interaction.
Very true. That actually reminds me, have you read the book of Lateral Thinking?
I have not.
Yeah, it's something. It's similar to the design process where I recommend for anyone out there that wants to create or do you want to be creative. It's a very good book, as it's a book about thinking wide instead of thinking specific, because you don't want to be tunnel vision, and the book kind of explains different thinking processes and mentality you can go around tackling a problem. So instead of just digging one hole, that was a metaphor they use, like digging one hole and hoping you hit diamond, you can dig multiple holes and see which one, and analyze each hole you dug or each route you explored, which one is the best route for you, right? And then continue off that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like kind of like a T shape, if you can imagine.
Yeah, totally. How did you find the process? Like, I feel like it was both fast and also deep.
Yes.
Like, I felt like we covered a lot and tried to tackle these pretty challenging questions in a pretty short amount of time, but it also felt very relevant to be working on something that was affecting society. I don't know.
100%. I don't know about you, man. For me, I was one of those kids that was lost at first because there's just so many different avenues you could take, right? I ended up with gaming because it was something I landed on. But it's like you said, imagine like a big infinity circle, like that, right? Where you kind of go explore one way, it becomes jumbled, you refine it, go back, analyze it, and then the loop it goes until you find something near what you wanted to have, right? Because like for me, I want to land on gaming, and I actually wasn't really thinking about doing gaming because I had other iterations of what my projects were gonna be until inspiration hit me. For me, I spent like 9% of my time on the computer, right? So I was just scrolling through Twitch, streaming a game streaming platform, and a kid named It's Me Perseus, who has, I believe it's called DMD. It's a type of body disorder, right, where he can't move his lower half of his body, and it's like a type of muscular disorder. But he still stays positive, and he still plays game and streams just to help him stay positive. And he has a very wonderful community behind him, right? And after hearing his story and seeing how he still gains, pushing through the pain, I kind of dived deep into that and found that as my motivation. Is like, oh, this is something that it actually really impacts people, right? That people actually oversee, because not a lot of people think of disabled gamers, right?
But that also touches on, I mean, it sounds like it touches on something really important during this, during this pandemic, which is like having ways to stay connected, and Twitch is kind of one of those, and gaming is a community. And I think for many people, there's been sort of a lack of community through this. So you've found a niche, which sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's very cool. For me, I got pretty lucky because a lot of my friends are gamers, as you can probably tell. And we have something called Discord. Some people have it, some people don't, but we have our own server where all our friends kind of come and hang out. And shout outs to those guys, my friends. I love them to death. And they kept me sane throughout quarantine. Right. Yeah, man, this is really cool. This is a lot of fun, actually. Anyways, guys, I don't know. What about you guys? Do you guys see design opportunities around you? Because they're everywhere. There's one thing I learned from my professor, Randy Lee, is that anything that's a problem is a design opportunity, which is kind of cool to think about because it kind of goes hand to hand to entrepreneurship, right? If you guys ever think about business, because business problems, solutions come from problems, obviously, right? Thank you for the pogs. But yeah, it's like it's almost like we're entrepreneurs, but with a whole different aspect about it. At least that's what I feel. It's very cool because we want to make things, yes, aesthetically pleasing, but on top of that, there's a reason why we make it aesthetically pleasing, and there's a reason why we do the things we do to help better society in general, or everyone that our product aims to help. I think that's really
Maybe
cool.
that's something, yeah, totally. Maybe we can draw on that question in the final question and answer and see if people have thought anything. Has that sparked any ideas, I wonder?
Yeah.
But maybe, what did we say? To get going at 50?
Yep, anytime now.
Okay, awesome.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right, guys, I hope you guys got your water. I hope you guys got your coffee. I hope you guys went on the breaks. We're moving on to the next segment.
Sweet.
Welcome back, Kemuel, my king. Welcome back. How you feeling?
I'm doing great. I feel refreshed after a cup of water, you know?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's what you like to hear.
All right. So let me introduce you all to our next project. So we have Deanna and Stanley here to present their project. One that's unique and one that I've had the pleasure of seeing develop over the course of the term for that project. So guys, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Deanna, and as Camille said, I worked on this project with Stanley. And we were interested in exploring the impacts of food insecurity, which sort of led us to exploring food waste. We discovered the rise of community fridges all over the world and sort of honed in on the initiative in Toronto. And for those who don't know, Community Fridge Toronto is a grassroots food sharing project, which aims to redistribute excess food. In our research, we wanted to understand the structures of food sharing, its stakeholders, improvements that could be made in its growth, and to ultimately ensure its long-term sustainability. Next slide.
I think we have the wrong slides in the presentation right now. I put on the Google Doc, I put like presentation slides as in a folder, and I think you're using the yeah.
Sorry about that.
It's like in a separate folder. It's okay.
Sorry about that.
All right.
Would you like to come back to you after the next presentation, or would you like to continue on now?
We can continue. We just take a little technical break.
If it's easier for you, Larry, we can just.
Or if it's easier, yeah.
It's your presentation, so which you would prefer? I can do that real quick. Sorry about this.
Michelle's loaded, who's after us. Totally go on. It doesn't matter for us if we go 10 minutes later.
Yeah. What? You're still seeing Pog.
Michelle, are you there and able to do that?
Yeah, I'm totally able to do that.
Okay. Sorry about the
I just told Alex
confusion.
about it.
We'll just be getting going. A sec.
Yeah, I'm been streaming it for. I'm gonna go
Okay,
through all the
awesome.
13 Resident Evils, 14
Hi
Resident
everyone, I'm
15.
Alex.
Michelle. As I was
I am sorry for last
introduced,
night that I
I
literally.
am also a third-year industrial
Thank
design
you.
student, and I have a deep interest in exhibition design and any experience with a deep sense of place. So, as such, my term project resulted in Arie, which is my response to the question: when situated in a dense urban space, how does the work from home experience benefit from the extension of routine beyond the physical environment? So I currently live in downtown Toronto ever since lockdown started in March, and we're currently going through another one. And I was lucky enough to get an internship this summer, although I was working remotely. And my supervisors said that, productivity was up significantly from previous years, pre-pandemic. But I found it very difficult to divide my work life from sort of my leisure life, or like work from home life, because I was working from home. So the next slide. So in the next slide, I was thinking about people who are in similar situations to mine, living in small apartment spaces with very limited green spaces and in very dense urban areas. So I started off thinking about commute and looking at altered perceptions of time in pre-COVID experiences. But after further research, I shifted it towards environmental psychology, looking at brain activity and the lateralization of brain activity. So ultimately, Arie's development stems from investigations in the links between physical and psychological transitional spaces, according to work from home adjustments. So the next slide. So when I was looking at different forms of a hypothesis, of course, I started off with commute. So I was looking at people who commuted from outside of Toronto to inside Toronto, and people who commuted around Toronto who lived in Toronto. And I noticed that when working from home, it was missing a few things that these transitional times of commute had, which were changes in elevation and also journeys through closed to semi-open spaces. So my hypothesis developed as working from home creates a constant between working and living spaces, disrupting the environmental psychologies of traditional home and office space. So then my how might we question developed as how might we reduce mental fatigue induced by detail-oriented processes in a work from home context by sparking moments of abstract thinking during transitional experiences between work and personal life. So next slide. Is a description or a brief description of what Arie is. So Arie is a digital experience. It's meant as a screen lock between at the start and the end of your workday. And it is a natural environmental scene set to mindfulness prompts that you can follow or you don't have to, but basically it's meant to spark mindfulness in these sort of in-between moments between work and leisure. The next page, next slide, shows my intended users. So originally I started off with, again, the commute brief, but after I decided to focus a lot more on what these users were doing now that they're working from home. So it's split into the work from home office worker and the work from home student. So the office worker does have a consistent daily routine in this work week. Meanwhile, the work from home student may have changing schedules per each work week or per each work day in the week. The next slide showcases it showcases the specific research that I looked into. So when I was looking into sort of different paths in identifying where this mental fatigue was coming from, I first started in cognitive science, which wasn't giving a lot other than, make sure to structure your days very well. So then I looked towards environmental psychology because the user is working in a fixed space long term. And I stumbled upon construal level theory. So construal level theory is it's an environmental psychological, it's a theory in environmental psychology that separates left and right brain activity according to your environment. So basically, when you're very up close in a space, you are engaging your left side, the left side of your brain. You're very detail oriented at the moment, and more logical when you're looking at things and processing things like that. So when you're very far away from things, like you're in a plane, sort of looking down on things, because you can't see as much detail, your brain abstracts what you're looking at and generalizes, which leads to a lot more creative thinking. So linking this to my project, work from home in urban spaces, as it typically involves, a lot of being on your laptop and you're in a very fixed space, it definitely stresses left side brain activity, which can contribute to mental fatigue. So moving forward in my project, I was looking at really broadening the space, although that might not be able to happen directly outside. Sorry. So incorporating both guided mindfulness while broadening the space will re-stimulate right side brain activity. So the next slide is the resulting experience in the product. So Arie is a screen lock that is enabled by a Google app. So Arie utilizes construal level theory alongside reduced active screen time to reduce work from home mental fatigue during the work week. Both the experience and control app take place over a desktop platform, which reduces screen interaction to a single device. The hazy environment and guided text meditation promote flexible engagement, providing the user freedom to follow the prompts or take in the moment through self-guided reflection with a day's work on pause. So the next slide shows briefly what the key interaction would be. So it starts with whatever day you choose to set your, sorry. So the first day of the interaction is when you set, when you want these screen locks to happen. And then the next parts of the interaction are your actual work days. I didn't really specify which work day or how it fit in the week, just to account for the shifting schedules of both the work from home office worker and the work from home student. So the next page shows a bit about the Google app and some, sorry, not the Google app. So the next part shows a bit about the actual screen lock experience. So the screen lock incorporates CLT using drone footage, so that way you really get that elevation and that slow zoom out. Ideally in the future, I would like to use replicated environments, so something closer to what we have with game design. So the video is synced with the text, so that's sort of the mood of the text goes along with, how you feel when you look at the environment. And there's also, this haziness, this blur to the environment that further pushes that idea of abstract thinking and, dropping down your attention to detail. So the next page shows the Google app, which is what you would encounter before you actually encounter the screen lock. So when you first log into Arie, it opens with this sort of emotion cloud. So you can say, this is how I feel today. And, it's a time prompt. So if you don't want to go through this, it'll go away in a few seconds. But using this information, Arie can then tailor the environment and also the mindfulness prompts to whatever you're feeling at the time of setting up these screen locks. So the next part is when you're actually setting up, the next slide is when you're actually setting up the screen lock as soon as it catches up, right? So you do have the option of incorporating your live location and weather so that when you open the screen lock, it will showcase a similar environment to where you are. Maybe not like immediately in an urban spaces, but maybe like an hour away. And that just further connects the user to a sense of space, even when they themselves cannot safely travel within their city or directly outside of their city. The next page, next slide. I guess this hasn't been updated. So very briefly, when I'm thinking about potential stakeholders for Arie, I'd be looking at school or work communication platforms such as Canvas or Slack, and this will help bring a better awareness to maintaining the mental well-being of employees and student user groups. So in the next slide, we look at, the namesake of this exhibition, micro, macro, and what's in between meso. So I did explain a lot about the micro interactions, as Arie is meant to help structure the individual user's routine. So broadening it out to a meso level, so thinking about how this would affect community interactions. For the user, this would mean that it intervenes with local neighborhood interactions when supplementing daily walks during unsafe times, such as the current lockdown periods of the pandemic. And it also creates brief communication blackouts. That way, it gives the user time for introspection and meditation. And at a macro level, and this also depends on the longevity of the work from home situation. It'll hopefully redefine professional and personal success within a work from home context, again, achieving that good work-life balance. It may establish work from home as a conventional workday, and it also emphasizes the importance of work-life balance to employers when integrating productivity aids. So last slide, or the next slide. So Arie, oh, no, sorry, it was too far. Sorry, the one before. So lastly, when we're thinking about the users, currently we're looking at students and people in the workforce that are currently working from home, but depending on the longevity of the pandemic, this could also extend to, future post-secondary students and future workers. Arie is an interesting answer to, difficulties in the work from home situations by addressing it through environmental psychologies rather than opening up green spaces in areas where it's not entirely possible. So engaging with brain activation, Arie is a meditative experience aimed to relieve the immediate stress of the day and the broader anxieties surrounding the pandemic. Thank you. That concludes my presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle. That was a wonderful presentation. I think we all could use a little bit of screen time, like away from the screen, really. Just because so much going on. Sorry, just quickly, let me pin everyone here. Boom. Okay, perfect. All right. Everyone's saying it's a beautiful presentation. We actually have a question from Allison. Thank you for your question, by the way, Allison. Could you expand on the game environment aspect you want to incorporate?
Okay, so the views obviously aren't going to change. I think that you'd be maybe starting from the ground and then moving farther up. But in some of the prototypes that I was making, I was looking at sort of open world games, and it was very low poly environments. And I really like sort of the less detailed aspect of that. And there's something really calming about, there not being a lot of detail, but, paying very close attention to the saturation, to the color grading. And I think that color plays a really powerful role in how you emotionally connect to environments. And so I wasn't looking for, anything that's more like details like that, but sort of looking at the overall experience and pushing it towards something that, isn't from direct live footage towards something that's more, more abstract or, more like not cartoonish. I guess more abstract, more stylized. I think would really help sort of move away from that sort of detail focus and being like, oh, I can't physically be in that space right now where they're showing. But it's like, oh yeah, this space doesn't exist, but I can connect to things that are very similar to it.
Perfect. I hope that answers your question. Thank you, Alexander, for saying good stuff. Very pog. Thank you for the pogs in chat. Thank you, Michelle. Actually, I have one more question. I was wondering, like, with the whole gaming thing, are you planning to? Would you ever expand to pitching this idea to another company if you could, or as well as would you add? Actually, I'll ask the second question after. But would you pitch this idea if you could?
I would. Yeah, I would. I don't think I would move it away from probably pitching in conjunction to Canvas or Slack. Obviously, like when I was doing some research, I was looking at like VR meditation on Steam, and I was like, that's a really cool idea, but I don't know if that's the best platform because it's sort of, all purpose. There's so many different types of games and purposes going on there. And I think by pitching it directly to places that and companies that are already associated with, productivity or like student and employee life, I think you can really start to change what the culture is there. And that's really the goal of, or that's really the long-term goal of Arie at a macro level.
Perfect. That's really sick. I was thinking, imagine like you can put this in Microsoft or something like that. Something for everyone, installed in, just so they can keep their mental health safe.
Mm-hmm.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle. We're gonna introduce the next guy. See you later. We are introducing. Sorry, let me pull him up here. My boy Ernesto with his project on airports on COVID-19. All right, so we know the whole world is kind of limited with traveling and different challenges with COVID-19 what comes with traveling and airports and all that kind of stuff. And Ernesto kind of found his own opportunity to capture it and has his own unique way of approaching this problem. So fly me to the moon, Ernesto.
Hi everyone, my name is Ernesto, and I decided to do this project since in the light of COVID-19, air travel has been one of the industries most affected by the pandemic. In addition to the efforts to contain the virus from spreading and ensuring passengers do not partake in non-essential travel, airports continue to lack ensuring like a clear system able to assure the health and safety of both passengers and airport staff. Passengers are not only having to navigate a complex security protocols and unfamiliar airports, they're also being challenged to comply with unclear measures that ensure their safety while traveling during a pandemic. So next slide, please. So how might be question was, how might we facilitate boarding travelers at airports and planes in order to create a system that meets with all the recommended health protocols and requirements? Next slide, please. So the things I wanted to focus most, so like I really wanted to minimize the spread of the virus, to achieve like a system that really creates a safe environment for everyone and is able to sustain during a pandemic. And kind of like how it could really help this the airport experience later on after even the pandemic. And it could be a better experience for everyone, for a new traveler, a traveler that depends on just always flying, and just anyone. Next slide, please. So the two user journeys I did, my two users were our airport staff as an airport crew member, and as I focused it as an international student who is abroad while studying and is stuck in a country by himself. So while I noticed between both of their journeys is the most stressful part and most kind of like the pain point of their experiences while boarding, since it's experience that almost lasts only 30 minutes, but it's the most overwhelming experience during taking a flight. So that's why I tried to cover all the pain points that I uncovered during during a pandemic and even pre-COVID to solve problems during that. So next slide. So what I really wanted to focus on is putting in attention right before boarding, having this clear text and as an email and also text where you have all the requirements and helpful information to help you guide you to your upcoming flight. And some recommendations that I did was document that the airline should let passengers document their carry-on for free, since this really minimizes contact in between passengers while boarding. Also noting that people, when queuing in the line while boarding, one of the main reasons they do it is because they have to they want to have their space for the luggage. So taking that out helps minimize the risk down to almost 5% of contact. And that's counting without a mask. So with a mask will be 1% since the filters in airplanes are very safe. Next, please. So I really wanted to also have a clear distinction in the screens. So I wanted to have screens that really show the important information and don't feel overwhelming for the passenger. So I wanted to have two screens, one with the basic information as the destination, the status, the boarding time, and the departure time, as well as the weather where you're taking, where your destination is. So this it's easily sectioned, like it's sectioned, and it really pops out and really is easy to read. Next slide. So beside it, I wanted to have constant reminders as well as visual, and also since in airports most of the announcements are by voice, so there's always that language barrier between passengers where it's not their native language, and sometimes the sound in an airport is very distorted, so you never know what they're saying. So having an additional screen beside it really helps the airport crew to minimize the questions and the stress with dealing with a lot of passengers. Next slide. So another thing I wanted to add is add another experience to waiting, since sometimes waiting seems longer. And another thing that us humans do is when we're waiting, we decide to do a line because it makes us think the times go faster. So having an experience that you can add to an app, as for example, as an Air Canada app that already has your board members but doesn't have an additional use. I wanted to use this app as, for example, to add a place where you can play big games, have a free meditation, like playlists and stuff like that, so you can relax pre-flight, and you don't have to worry if like you're gonna lose your flight. Like for example, if you're listening to your Spotify and like you don't notice, like since it's within the app will know when your flight's coming and like when you start boarding. And also I wanted to add these element of kind of like curated playlists and videos to your destination, so you know what's up there, like a good I don't know, places to go. So that's more in like in the future of after COVID, but also as health like requirements, so you can see what you need before flying. Next slide. I wanted to add this element as boarding pass as a wristband and kind of create this unlosable ticket that it's hands-free and there's less hand-in-hand interactions, that it would include an RFID chip, which will create this touchless boarding. So it's perfect for also adding this experience of within the airport, having this option of while boarding and even in the stores, having this cashless environment where there's less hand-to-hand interactions between users. And you don't have to worry about where your boarding pass is. Next slide. And I also wanted to incorporate, since most passports have this new technology, which is called the NFC reader. So since when you're boarding, a lot of the airport crew members rely on touching your passport and really going hand to hand between passengers, and since the time is short, there's no time for hand sanitizer and stuff like that. So having this like touchless system where you just like tap your passport, and it's actually more secure since it's a way to verify a passport validation. So it's a better way for boarding. Next slide. So looking at the micro perspective, we see that, for example, passengers who are isolated within a country and want to return home or have their families separated by borders or long distances can help their mental health. Also, this would create income for people who really depend on tourism, and since it's one of the biggest part of the economy in the world, it's really important for communities who rely on tourism. So the messy part would be actually the travel industry, such as airlines, airports, stores, would really benefit having this income that benefits overall the whole economy, which is the macro, since there's whole countries that really depend on their tourism economy to exist. So having a better system, a better safe system of traveling, having a better way to seek solutions and just find a new way to discover new parts of the world could be a great option. Next slide. So thank you. That's all for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Ernesto. And so, I want to let everyone in the chat know, leave a question if you have any. We can address at least one of them right now. I just wanted to give you a little commentary from myself, Ernesto. I think this is an awesome app to have, especially with the circumstances. And I think what I'm seeing from your project is something I think that will, I guess, further the innovation of travel when we are able to do that again. And so I think this is a great platform to just start, the same way with healthcare, how it's pushed the needs and demands to accommodate with the times. I think what your project is implying as well is the same thing with travel. And I think this is a great step in the sense that it indicates we need to develop further in our traveling and even in our even in the way we do things after a pandemic. So it's really exciting to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my main focus was we realized this pandemic made us realize on a lot of things and problems we're looking at. So we see that our health system is sometimes wrong, and we see that there's always improvement on other things, and how, for example, when the travel industry really changed was after 9/11, which was a very chaotic time, and it showed how finding new solutions can really help us again experience traveling in a different way and a safer way.
Very true. It's actually five head. I actually love the idea, especially the wristband. Reminds me of Dave and Buster's, where it'd be so much easier just to be tap everything on your wrist and move on with your day, with so much less confusion as well. So great job in there. A lot of pog in the chat again. Thank you for those who are pogging and saying nice presentations. We really appreciate it. I love you guys. And yeah.
All right. Thank you, Ernesto.
Perfect. Thank you.
And so we'll move on to the next presentation. And so as you mentioned earlier, we had Deanna and Stanley have technical difficulties, but they're ready now. So we're going to bring it back to Deanna and Stanley to...
One more sec. Sorry, I got to restart.
Yeah, no problem.
No worries.
So we'll just give them a moment. But yeah, we're going to take this time to allow Stanley and Deanna to just prepare themselves. And for everyone in the chat, give us more questions. Help us out. Tell us what you're thinking of a lot of these presentations you've seen so far. what is your take on a lot of what you've seen so far, and just so that we can come back to it at the end.
Yes, sir.
Having said that, I think they're ready. So we're going to give it to Deanna and Stanley. So take it away.
Yeah, let's try this again. So as I mentioned before, Stanley and I were interested in the impacts of food insecurity, and it sort of led us to exploring food waste. And we discovered the rise of community fridges all over the world and honed in on the initiative within Toronto. And for those of you who don't know, Community Fridge Toronto is a grassroots food sharing project, and it aims to redistribute excess food. So next slide. And in our research, we wanted to understand the structures of food sharing, its stakeholders, and the improvements that could be made to support its growth to ensure its long-term sustainability. Next slide.
It's more context to our project. We noticed the initial fallout of the pandemic has led to a lot more job loss, and thus people are more susceptible to food insecurity. But then on the other side of things, there's already a huge excess being thrown out.
No problem, dude.
There's a lot of food being thrown out across the world. In the US alone, there's roughly $240 billion worth of food thrown out annually. And additionally, grocery stores purposefully overstock to create this illusion of unlimited abundance, which is disposed of, which 30% of is disposed of by the end of the month. We began to investigate food sharing. Thus, we began to investigate food sharing, an activity gaining popularity in cities such as Berlin and New York, as well as Toronto, to tackle these issues by redistributing excess food into an open resource available to anyone in the public. Next slide. For those interested more on the topic of food waste, there's a really good documentary on CBC Docs produced by the late Anthony Bourdain. It highlights the big metrics of food waste and global responses to this issue. And it was a good stepping stone for us in our research. Next slide. Okay. We then conducted some academic research on the topic of food sharing and food inequity. Some of the key points include in comparison with non-Western cultures, food could have a multi-dimensional impact on society if it is viewed more holistically. This is if you view food more than just a commodity for individual consumption, and begin to see it more as a public resource or a commons capable of bringing communities closer together. Secondly, we noticed that the most successful food sharing projects, for the example of the ones in Berlin, they combined social innovation with technical innovation. And because food sharing doesn't belong to anyone, it's kind of in the legal gray zone, and therefore we must create ways for people participating in this community to be more accountable. Finally, even in charitable organizations, there can be assumed positions of power and authority. One person may think that their role may outweigh other members, which affects their behavior and communication with stakeholders, which indicates that we need to use more non-hierarchical approaches to organization and communication within our own project. Next slide. This is just a map indicating where the current food sharing resources are. The ones in the downtown area are the ones set up by Community Fridges Toronto. There's one out in Rexdale. It's part of this initiative called Road to Zero Waste, which tries to reduce food waste. It's in the back of like an Alibaba's. Someone has like created a little fridge and container for excess food. And we envision in the future that there's going to be a lot more of these food sharing sites popping up in the major metropolitan area of Toronto, as well as the rest of the GTA. Right now, you can see food bank. The only thing that exists in the peripheries of the major metropolitan area are food banks. Next slide, sorry.
So to get a bit of a better idea of how the community fridge system was currently operating in Toronto and sort of what their ethos was, we conducted some user research by talking to Jalil Bokhari, who's one of the people who helped start the initiative. And we learned that the restaurants and small businesses who host the fridges provide the power, but technically no one has ownership of it. The fridge is the community's fridge. And they have this no eyes policy, which implies that there's no hierarchy and that everyone is just as important. And that they keep the fridges outside in order to alleviate some of the discomfort and embarrassment. He mentioned that a lot of restaurant staff and servers have been impacted and are finding themselves in food insecure situations and are a bit embarrassed about it. Next slide.
These are just some examples of how Community Fridges Toronto communicates their needs and guidelines to ensure that excess food is safe for public consumption, such as labeling your food, cleaning out the fridge, and tidying up the fridge once you're done with it. This was a precedent that we'd like to put into our project as well. Next slide, sorry. Different from the other projects, there's actually 2 interactions that we are working with in our project since we are a group. So there's 4 individual stakeholders that feed into the final design. I focused on the interaction between donors and hosts, which are people that want excess food, that want to give away their excess food, and people that facilitate the storage for these donations. Deanna focused on the relationship between recipients and volunteers. These are people that are experiencing food insecurity and use the food sharing program. And the volunteers are people that give up their time to help out the program from different backgrounds. Next slide. To build upon our research, we established personas for each of our stakeholders, created empathy maps as well as user journey maps to understand their needs. From this, we were able to extract the following takeaways. For me, the host primarily relies on social media to relay information to the public, which may be problematic for donors that are not as active or present online. B, the host is often busy and cannot ensure that people interacting with the fridge are following food sharing guidelines. And finally, the donor does not necessarily know where their contributions have the most value, nor can they visualize their impacts, which hinders them from helping out more often.
And some of the takeaways I got from the relationship that I explored was the disconnect between the recipient and the rest of the community fridge ecosystem. They currently have no real way of voicing their needs. Secondly, that the volunteer has trouble coordinating schedules and job desires with the admin person who's doing all of the coordination. And then lastly, there's no digital connection between all of the stakeholders, so all of the relationships we've just mentioned, which sort of hinders the formation of a community. Next slide. So through the development of our project, we asked a couple of questions for how might we develop a communication platform for food sharing communities so members can work more cohesively to redistribute excess food, and how can this be non-hierarchical? And then additionally, how might we infer a stronger sense of accountability for the community it serves? Next slide. And the answer to some of these questions is common. Our app, which is a community-driven food sharing platform that connects all stakeholders into one transparent network by aggregating donations and allowing them to interact so that more specific needs are communicated. And we also chose the name Common as a takeaway from starting to think about food as a commons rather than a commodity.
This is just showing the human factors matrix we used as the framework for our final design, just to document our process. It was interesting to find out how to integrate emotional factors with more obvious physical and cognitive factors within like a digital platform. Next slide. Finally, we're just going to give a brief overview of some of the features of our apps and the interactions between the stakeholders. What you see here is a prompt for donors to follow if they want to make a donation. The app then locates hosts that want specific items if the donors do not already know where to contribute. It then organizes and schedules a time for them to drop off their food, and notifying the host and allowing the host to know who's coming in and out. The donors and hosts all have QR codes on their phones, which which provides access to these food sharing locations and allows information to be tracked. These food sharing locations have public profiles where everyone can see what's available or needed, as there is a grocery list function in the host interface. Moreover, the host has access to analytics for the stock of the fridge and to know who's taking the food, how long the food's been in the fridge, when's the last time the fridge has been cleaned. And if something is wrong, the host and donor can always communicate with each other through a simple chat function. Next slide.
So on the volunteer side of the app, the person interested in volunteering will click into the volunteer button, and then they will be asked a series of onboarding questions like which fridges they want to volunteer at, if they have a car, how many days or hours they want to commit, and then they can leave additional notes. So for example, this volunteer lives with their parents, so they want to be presented with tasks that avoid people or are not at peak fridge times. And further, they are presented with job postings based on all of these onboarding questions, so they can actually sign up for the tasks instead of them being delegated. So in addition to having agency over the job, there isn't someone having to coordinate all of the volunteers. And then on the recipient side, they're shown all of the fridges, and there's a map where they can see the fridge location in relation to their location. And once they click into their desired fridge, they're able to get an idea of what's inside before going, similar to how you would experience your own fridge. And the recipient can further click into an item to see further notes about it. And one of the points that Jaleel mentioned in our interview was the fact that sometimes recipients didn't know how to use the ingredients like fresh produce. So I've added the option for donors to leave recipes. And then additionally, recipients can click into the information icon at the bottom of the screen, which will provide some information on when it was cleaned and by whom, if that volunteer chose to have a public profile. So recipients are able to connect with volunteers and donors who have left their profiles public or hosts. Next slide. And because not everyone has access to a phone or internet all the time, we explored the option of having a fob system as a system of offline access that upholds community safety, but still allows everyone to access the fridge. Next slide. Ultimately, in our impact analysis, we'd like to influence local authorities to rethink policies surrounding food and leverage the unique skills of stakeholders to grow over time. That being recipients playing a bigger role in the process and highlighting some of the unique skills that volunteers could bring to the table. Some of them are coming from very different backgrounds like architecture or law, so they could leverage some of those skills and really shifting the discussion of food as a commodity to food as a commons. Next slide. This project really shifted the way we think about food and food governance, and we are beginning to see how communities can work together to become closer through times of unanticipated crisis. Thank you. And we welcome any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Stanley. Thank you, Deanna. This is a very well thought out project in itself. And I think, we have to commend you for a lot of the effort that you guys went through to do the research and to really come through with a project very thoroughly processed. But yeah, Wilson, I want to know what's your take on this project, and if the chat is ready with questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll look at them.
Yeah, I will say definitely easier to dive in deeper with two people, so that's the reason we got to explore so much.
That's true. How do you guys divvy up the work? I was wondering about that. Like, you guys did a fantastic job. Really, really well done.
We just did like Deanna did this volunteer recipient relationship.
Yeah.
And we did like empathy maps for that as well. So she did the empathy maps for that side of things. And I did like this host donor relationship. So we just made like separate, the same type of thing, but twice.
So it's true collaboration, it sounds.
Yeah, but we wanted to just make the same project, but it wouldn't be fair for everyone else if we just did like half the work compared to everyone working on their own. So
true, 100%.
That's very true.
I think I
guess it makes it more real too. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. No worries. I was just adding a comment. I thought it was like the project is really like five-head, like very smart, because like food waste is a huge problem in the world right now. Even like to the point where France is like making laws with it, right? But yeah, I think this could be something that's it could be like implemented in Toronto, hopefully soon. Something I would want to see.
Yeah. The Japanese laws around food waste are really innovative. They have specific like farmers that can use food waste and feed their livestock with like specific like waste. So you could have like a pig that's like just been eating this recycled tuna for like 8 months, and it's like
it's all good.
An extremely unique product because no one's like raising pigs like that in the world.
That's sick.
So you can make there's a lot of opportunity in food waste, because if you don't eat the food, you can also use it for fertilizer. I think that's always like the final way to like recycle food waste, if like you can't feed anyone or you can't feed any animals.
Yeah. Right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Deanna. Thank you, Stanley, for your project and your time. Next up, we have Begum, who is going to present her project, Leap Futures. Begum, are you here?
Hi, everyone. Oh, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is and this is my project, Leap Futures. Next page. Okay, so just a little bit of context into my project. Since the pandemic, there has been an increase in social distancing. There have been an increase in fear and paranoia towards each other and towards oneself. This is especially present in the increased calls on domestic violence, as I mentioned before, marital issues, divorce, and there has been a boom in calls to the suicide hotlines. the decreased social interaction, the fear of possibly catching the deadly virus, all contribute to a rise in anxiety and mental health issues. So my design challenge for this was, how can we create an experience for people to receive therapy and other mental health resources in order to reduce fear and build towards a more mindful mindset. This question was inspired by the pandemic, but it is a timeless pursuit. Next page. Okay, so the requirements for this were, initially I wanted to create a product, a service, or an experience that was able to help people cope with negative emotions while in turmoil. If a solution works well for something as extreme as the pandemic, then surely it has potential to work for causes of lesser extremes. So I wanted my product to extend beyond COVID. The options were to create a physical product and or a technology that already exists, or incorporate some sort of technology that already exists. Next. Ultimately, I came to the idea that while remotely delivered, the best way for one to get a real world experience can be given through virtual reality. In this project, I would combine gaming, VR, and therapy all into one. Next. So Leap Futures is a virtual reality therapy platform experience. And the way it works is it combines CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, into a gaming process that allows people to face and transcend beyond their fears and mental limitations. Basically, the way it works is, at the very beginning, you start by creating an avatar and you pick a mission. For example, a very common theme in the pandemic is that people have been experiencing social anxiety and have increased anxiety when it comes to going out and paranoia. So the game uses CBT trained artificial intelligence. The way it works follows the same process that mental health practitioners use CBT for therapy. This involves being put in a situation where you are experiencing the fear notched down a little. This will help clarify where the issues occur and how it manifests itself. Then comes the mindfulness part, where you are tasked to notice and acknowledge your thoughts and behaviors. Depending on the situation, you will be tasked with different techniques such as emotional freedom technique or meditation. This helps to process these negative emotions. After, you will do an exercise to gauge which thoughts and actions are useful and which ones hinder you. After that, you will be prompted to take on one of those trigger points and create a goal of improving your response and how you deal with those emotions. The level after that will slowly build up harder and harder, just like a video game, to build up skills and allow for increased confidence until your new response becomes natural for you. This is the entire CBT process in a nutshell. Next. So that, what I just explained, that is the virtual reality experience. Behind the scenes, we do have an app where you can basically do all the work before. So creating the avatar and creating the mission and seeing your stats and seeing all the information about your experience. The product is the VR experience. So we do have an app. The logic behind the avatar is that studies have shown, and when people embody a different identity, then they are most likely to act and think differently. There was a study done where a group of people were asked to run a certain length, and they were tasked on their speed and endurance. The first task, they typically ran with the normal clothes they were wearing and typically ran with the way that they usually do. And in the second test, the same group of people were asked to wear white lab coats while they ran. You know what the difference was? In the second test with lab coats, each of the participants actually ran faster than previously. And they had more endurance and more confidence in themselves. But why is this? The reason behind this is because the lab coat has this superhero effect on them. The lab coat is associated with more education, sometimes more intelligence, and even more competence. So just the mere of thought, of the thought of it made people more confident in themselves. This confidence became a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they ended up becoming more confident in their competence. This is the same reason why a lot of times children actually take on these superhero roles when they're young or as their favorite idols. And over time with this, people can learn to gain these qualities such as confidence without the need to embody somebody else. There's a really good book that explains this. It's called The Alter Ego Effect that I got inspired from. If you guys want to check that out. All right, so just like any game, you see the stats of your avatar and the strengths, and you can play this. You can play the same levels and challenge yourself so you can improve these different stats like speed, confidence, social skills, and all that stuff. Next. All right, so going into the missions, you'll be prompted with different types of goals matching your needs and state of mind. These all have different levels which you can unlock just like a video game, play and replay as much as you want to improve your avatar specs. At the end of each play, you will see your stats for your performance, such as the improvements you have made from previous levels and the next steps going forward. Each one of these will have different levels and different sub-levels. There, you can click on you can click to play, and this will sync you with your VR headset in real time so that what you do on the app is in your simulation and vice versa. And then next page. And then going into the simulation, you will see different specs on what level it is, different features. The biggest feature is the voice commanded tips and instructions which will guide you through every step of the way should you choose that option. This will also offer surround sound as well as a device you wear that monitors your heartbeat and breathing for an accurate read on your physical state of mind, or your physical state and your mental state. You can choose to remove visuals for a more immersive experience, and you can talk to the AI to help you. For a deeper experience, users also have an option of having a live coach in person, like an actual person instead of an AI, that will help to kickstart the game for you, like a live therapy session, and help to address the best solutions as you're getting started. Next page. This is an immersive experience. Next page. Next page. The medium for this experience is virtual reality. The method is gaming, and the motivation is a new future for the mental and spiritual betterment of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Begum, for the presentation. I really appreciate that. That one's really cool, actually. It kind of reminds me of like Skyrim in a way, except really based around yourself and building confidence. Sorry, I'm just pinning. Just pinning everyone here. Perfect. All right, cool. Thank you, Jelani, if I said that right. He said it was absolute fuego. Oh, and Kathy has asked you a question. She says she's not sure if she missed anything, but is this VR device used? Do you think it's already readily accessible?
The technology or the VR?
The VR for
like the experience in itself?
Yeah.
All right. So right now, like virtual reality is just at the beginning stages. There are a lot of virtual reality games right now that focus on fears, like for example, getting over the fear of heights. But this would be a more advanced level to that, and this would be something that would follow suit. Another thing after that is at the very beginning, say this was something I did, we would create these experiences, for example, public speaking or like conference and all that stuff. But as virtual reality technology improves, we would have the option where users can actually create their own adventures so that it's customizable to them. And this is more in the future. Virtual reality is only really getting started at the moment.
Yeah, I really like that idea. And
I hope
also
that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it did. And I also want a question for myself actually is I want to think about and ask you about like, have you thought about user generated content? Like as you make your own missions and all that. It feels like it could be an endless adventure with the right player base.
Yeah, that would be like, yeah, like extending the platform and, you know, beyond just in something that's individual. I think that's definitely an option. You know, this is really based on trying to help people getting over fears and getting over limitations. So making it into competition. You know, how like on Candy Crush, there's like a scoring system. You're like, oh, you're 100th in the world. Like imagine in this virtual reality game where it says like you're like 5th on level of, I don't know, like social skills or confidence or something like that, like something more international.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are definitely options.
Definitely trying to mid-max everything. I feel you. That's really cool. Thank you so much, Begum, for that wonderful presentation. Got a lot of fuegos in the chat. I appreciate that. And thank you, Jelani. Yeah, sweet. That's such a cool name. All right, next we have Natasha.
Hi, everyone.
Here she is. Perfect. So we have Natasha here with her project. I guess you can just take it away because you're right here. Let's go.
I'm here. Hi. How are you?
Fantastic. I hope you're doing well as well.
I am. Well, I'm the last presenter, so thank you everybody for sticking around. And I guess I'll start. My name is Natasha. I am also a third-year industrial design student, and I'm coming to this project from, I think, a larger sort of speculative approach. So not necessarily contextualized within something that is a potential deliverable project, but assessing our current moment. And so I wanted to pose these questions that I think hopefully will sum up what a lot of us are trying to do. So if we go to the next slide, I will, there we go. So I wanted to ask, just in general and to start my project, how will we interact with spaces in each other? How will the way that we interact with spaces in each other look in a post-COVID world? So as we move away from the real, and as social distancing and isolation tend to become the norm, how is that going to change how we interact? We already have seen throughout the course of the projects presented here that there has been a negative impact on mental health due to exclusion, experiences of exclusion, or a removed level of normalcy that we were used to, whatever that is, and it's related to the individual. So be it somebody who took solace and escape in watching film, or somebody who misses hanging out with their friends at school, or even being in a physical space. How do we move into a future where we might actually have to remain removed from those spaces, or we might not normalize? So to the next slide, I ask, how can we reimagine and augment these spaces for individuals in a world where distance might be the new norm? And how does that affect us as individuals and how we interact with ourselves, in our relationships, etc. So my project specifically is focusing on sexual interactions and intimate interactions, even just through tactility and touch. So I ask for my project, in the absence of a partner or a loved one, how might we recreate similar experiences of tactile comfort that's grounded in a physical reality? And so, to the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about my process work, because that was a large part of my project. And again, being more speculative, it's where I drive a lot of my research. So I initially had started this project by creating an instructional guide for interacting with structures and objects found in your home to simulate various human interactions in isolation. So I took a lot of inspiration from Temple Grandin, who created the squeeze box to help her with her experience of autism, and also the work of an Indigenous writer. Her name's Melissa K. Nelson. She wrote a piece called Getting Dirty, the Eco-Eroticism of Women in Indigenous Oral Literature. And so that piece itself spoke a lot about these women who would interact or find comfort or relationships with inanimate objects, with natural experiences, and how that was so deeply tied to their sense of identity, their sense of strength as females. And so looking at these tactile experiences of things that are inanimate or removed or not other people, how can that supplement us when we are in isolation? So how can we redesign our home, the way that we orient ourselves in our home, in a way that it's like jumping into water that receives us warmly, or jumping into the arms of your lover? And so I present to you my amorphous shape in this next slide. And it is called the pleasure object. So here you see something that is somewhat phallic or somewhat resonant of a female anatomy. And so this object here would be something that is generated through a discriminative code, which I'll talk about later. But the idea of, again, to touch on what my specific interaction is, it's concerned with the intimate physical relationships cultivated by two sexual beings, and the negative impacts on mental health that have resulted from the inability to engage with partnered intimacy and sex, or even comfortably with self-sex in the context of not knowing if there's going to be a person, if there was ever a person, especially if you previously experienced societal exclusion. So kind of taking into account a very, very sensitive topic and a very taboo topic and bringing it to light. So if we go to the next slide, we'll move away from the sex toy and see how it actually ties into the idea of a home experience. This is a little bit more about my process. I am deeply interested in digital spaces and how they relate to our physical spaces. And so this code here that I've written that actually generates these shapes, super shapes randomly that you can then freeze frame and export is built upon a code written by a software engineer named Andrew Marsh. He creates a super shape generator, which creates these really like unbelievable shapes. So I went in and I tweaked it to create this object that you could change that would stay within a little bit more. You can see that there's something that's a little bit more angular, but something that stays within a little bit more of a pleasant form, or a form resonant of fleshy objects that we do enjoy. And so this would then tie into what would later be a digital experience where you could use sliders or toggles to kind of change the shapes, the directions of the shapes in which they're growing to something that almost resonates with you in either a sexual manner or just visually appealing. And then that could upload to a larger database if you choose to have a conversation about that. What might make you excited about that shape, or other people? What do you then, maybe you thought was strange, or not a topic that you want to talk about? It opens up a conversation in a different way based off of just these forms that look like organs or body parts that we do idealize and we find comfort in. And so moving on to the next slide, we'll see that my idea then was to tie it into, and this is going to go back to my my starting point. How do we create a space? How do we orient ourselves within our space in a way that it does receive us lovingly, like a partner or a mother? I live alone. I've lived alone throughout the course of the isolation, and many people do. Many people are living in exclusion, like I mentioned before, or after marginalized communities, the elderly, people living or experiencing disability. So it's interesting to think, when we have now put such an importance on the home as a safe space, the home as a space of comfort, how can we then compound that experience of comfort by literally making the home the thing that we engage with? And so if you recall from other slides, I had myself pressed between two doors to simulate a hug was the experience, and the books pressed on me, again, the pressure of waking up with a lover. How can we then remove the friction from our spaces, like door handles or cupboard handles or corners on things, to be fleshy, to be something that we press ourselves against and it wants us there just as much as we want to be there? So again, very speculative. How can we take the home, which is our place of isolation, it is our place of safety, but also the place that drives us into a mental isolation that can cause this experience of negative coping behaviors or sadness, loneliness, and then that exacerbates pre-existing conditions or gives new conditions to us? How can we change the spaces that we live in, that they no longer are a source of that friction or that discomfort that we feel? I guess a stark realization of our place within an object removed from everybody else. So moving to my next slide. We'll hang out here for a little bit because this is my last slide. What you would do is you would play with the online generating discriminative code. It would generate a shape for you. You decide you like it. You can export it quite easily as an object file. That object file can be printed in a silicone silicone form, 3D printed, silicone coated, and it can be fixed to a pre-existing very standard door handle. So you'd receive this object. You could order it for a friend. You could order it for your partner. You could have it on your own, and you can explore your own sexuality with this thing that exists within an erogenous region. So I did choose the door handle because on most adult individuals, seated or standing, it will caress or sit in an area that can be considered stimulating, either in our genital region, on our shoulders and chest area. There are a number of places that it can just kind of comfort us in that way. So I wanted to explore the idea of a haptic compulsion, or a need for tactility, a need for touch in certain areas that do stimulate the release of certain hormones that give us a feeling of comfort. And so that would be how you receive an object and how you interact either through the database or with a partner or on your own, explore your own conversation with yourself and your body to bring somatosensory stimulation back in a way that provides you with comfort, and to embrace your home and perhaps your isolation or yourself in a way that then alleviates what is mostly a temporal experience of anxiety, stress, or depression, not necessarily clinical, but it can compound to something that does become a little bit more difficult. So the idea of play in spaces, I think, is deeply therapeutic, even more so than the idea of touch. But beyond the manifested design of a sex toy door handle, which is what we're looking at here, the pleasure object is, again, it's a speculative work that explores a new expression of sexuality through fostering the normalization of sex in the space, in your home, the normalization of self-sex or distance partnered sex, facilitated through the engagement with this object, something that can just be retrofitted to your house. So it considers ergo-erotics, the sexual ergonomics of objects, and the deeply therapeutic and educational properties of touch. And so that is the project in the whole. And the more speculative thing that he did with this, I think that a lot of us go into design through what we've done here, is how do we solve for the contemporary moment? How do we solve for friction? How do we remove friction? And while this kind of seems like, oh, it's interesting, like it is a little bit more playful, and it does ask, well, why do we need to remove friction from these spaces? Why is there an idealized sort of redesign of everything to suit our needs for consumption, for comfort? And do we convince ourselves that our designs are good when they remove all friction and negativity from human expression? So with this, with all of this, and to I guess sum up the speculative sense to this, the contrary to what I've presented here, I do want to read a small excerpt from a South Korean born Swiss-German philosopher, and he's a cultural theorist as well. His name's Young-Chul Han, and it's from his book called Saving Beauty. So I read. The smooth is a signature of the present time. It connects the sculptures of Jeff Koons, iPhones, and Brazilian waxing. Why do we find today what is smooth beautiful? Beyond its aesthetic effect, it reflects a general societal imperative. It embodies today's society of positivity. What is smooth does not injure, nor does it offer any resistance. It is looking for like. The smooth object deletes its against. Any form of negativity is removed. So with that, I want to ask to everyone listening, and to my colleagues, designers, and to designers in general, when we remove friction and resistance or the other from our designs, do we remove our designs from reality? Do they begin to become removed from reality? Do we lose context or design context out of our work? And do then we design longevity out or sustainability for these projects? Thank you.
Wow. What a very conceptual and, I guess, mind-boggling way to describe that summary, in all honesty. I mean, I love it. I love it. It's great thinking that I
Thank
got
you.
out of that.
I think that, like, with this, like, what we've seen throughout the course of the pandemic is that our identity is so strongly tied to our experience of the real tactile world, of meeting new people, of going out and exploring. And when we restrict that, you lose a piece of yourself, you lose the ability to express yourself. And so maybe we do delve into this digital world. And as we aggressively move into a digital socio space, are we removing ourselves from what is the human experience? Do we know? And does that compound and become something very negative? And so I think that we've really confronted what our personal weaknesses are, how we flock to escape certain things through frictionless experiences like TikTok or like the internet or virtual reality. And as great as that can be, do we weaken ourselves as a collective? Do we remove ourselves from something that is deeply important, which is friction gives us an ability to learn. So my the sex toy object is like, you take something, you try and solve for it, you create this smooth, beautiful packaged item, you have to feel good. But do you want to feel good in that way? How do we look differently at design problems instead of just saying like, wipe it clean, smooth it down? Mm-hmm. It's true. And where do you take the uncomfortable and sit with it and build in a different way that isn't just maybe fill the void with another shape, it'll be okay, put this shape there, you're good. Like maybe you actually have to sit with that discomfort to really address larger socioeconomic issues, larger social justice issues. Like we confront it head on when we realize like, oh, you can't buy an answer to that. We shouldn't buy an answer to that. And how do we then design social interactions or design these digital spaces in a way that fosters a real growth and revolution as humans, as opposed to just escaping what is our reality.
Exactly. And it's sick. Sorry guys.
Weird art project.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great art project. I think it has a lot of implications. Sorry guys. Just to give you guys a bit of context, I was muted on the stream by accident. Sorry. I was just saying, like, you cannot run away from your problems. And much like the sex toy, if you want a coarse, you can have it that way, or you can have it smooth. It's all about balance in life, and that's just like how the project is. And that's just a little context of that. And so we have some questions for you, Natasha, if you're ready.
Yeah.
All right, Mel, you want to moderate that?
Yeah. Well, actually, I think we can move into a time of Q&A from here on. So, but we can start with Natasha since she's already here. So someone in the chat was saying this can also expand to people who don't feel comfortable with human interaction, like with the purpose of Temple Grandin's hug machine.
What is that?
So I think it was a reference back to your presentation.
So Temple Grandin was a woman who, don't quote me now, I'm going to sound terrible, I think it was in the 70s, when she had gone off to university, experienced a lot of discomfort. And so living on the autism spectrum, she would be not uncomfortable going out. She would have attacks or anxiety attacks, or need to stimulate herself in order to self-soothe. And so she developed this squeeze box, which essentially would put pressure on her. And through the experience of pressure, it would calm her down, that she could then continue to do the work that she needed to do. Incredible work. They do implement similar technology in slaughterhouses to calm animals before they do that. I'm a vegan, so it's sad. But it's something that pressure, obviously, like we know, a hug will release oxytocin. Like there are things that are very important with that stimulation. So yeah, it is very much tied to the idea of, if you, in this current moment, living by yourself, like you've got a vibrator, you're good, you don't have to worry about trying to meet somebody on Hinge. But there are people who are maybe asexual, who don't feel comfortable experiencing sexuality with other people unless they deeply love them. Even in that context, might not want to, but there is still like a human desire to self-stimulate or self-soothe. And it could even just be like haptic touch. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be sexualized. It could just be enjoyable tactility. Or people who are just uncomfortable in general, who don't necessarily want to bridge out in that way. People who experience societal exclusion prior to the pandemic and post the pandemic, if they are typically house ridden, if they're not considered desirable by society. Like there are so many reasons why somebody might want to interact with spaces And for them, I see that being, and for that context, I see it being an interesting solve in the context of, a piece for consumption, which it is framed as, and, it's an easy buy, you print it out, you like it, it's like a joke sort of thing, or it could be a cool sex toy. I mean, there's such a lucrative market. In that regard is where I pose the question of why do we design things for consumption that soothe us in that way, that appeal to that need to just be constantly doted after from our surroundings and from the people around us.
Yeah, I think it should be all normalized because, like, whatever brings you, I guess, happiness in your life, you should just pursue it, right? Because, like, it's like you said, it's taboo, and I feel like it should come to light and be proud of, like, hey, this is what I like. I think this is cool, right?
Yeah, it opens the conversation about that sort of thing too. Like even just like the shapes, like the idea of like interacting with these shapes online, like how many times do we as individuals, like a lot of us has spoken about how we connect through gaming here or things like that. Like there are, as troubled as it as well, there are people who connect through forums where they can openly speak about their sexuality or sexual preferences. And when you begin to remove the taboo around that, or you open up conversations, I think that it allows people to not be repressed and in turn maybe not hurt their partners or hurt their loved ones or do things that we know to be perhaps problematic in terms of a sexual pursuit. I don't have to name them, but when you can explore yourself openly and be received openly, it might cultivate a better talk around sex. And from that, a lot less trauma, a lot less hurt, unintended malignancies,
It sounds like it goes down to the key of like communication, right? Like that's the key to every successful relationship, in my opinion. Yeah, right. We have another question from Jacqueline. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for being an active chatter. Are you worried about comfort and sizing? And if you can make and print the object, is there a possible restrictions to its creative modeling?
So with the code that I had written, what it does is it'll just generate a shape for you. And the parameters are just that, like, it wouldn't necessarily scale to something that's like stab worthy when printed. So there'll still be like roundness to the overall object. That itself is just an open object file that then can be exported and scaled as needed. For the sake of like manufacturing, as I imagine if this were to go into production, I'm sure that scale would be something determined by a manufacturer. Like we can only print between X and Y for this cost to kind of mitigate that sort of variable. However, if it was something that just became like these are objects, we can reprint you a candlestick, we can reprint your entire cabinetry, we can do all these sorts of things, then I imagine that would then become a larger production and there wouldn't be issues.
100%. That's really cool. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much, Natasha.
Thank you.
If I could jump in, I think what Natasha's project really illustrates, and especially this discussion, is sort of the ethos of our exhibition, in a sense, looking at a micro kind of very personal interaction and bringing it into the space of like discussion, like making it more a topic of necessary conversation almost. And I think something that many of these projects, just to tie into the rest of the exhibit, is the same sort of thing in different contexts. So taking small scenarios and looking at the expanded discussion and how we can readdress as we come out of pandemic or through future pandemics, what the new, like what normal is and how to adapt to normal. And I think that's something that sort of maybe ties into, if we want to answer any questions about the general exhibit or talk.
Sure, we can also like loop it back to some of the questions we missed. If you guys want to do that real quick, like Daniel, are you here?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, Daniel, if you don't mind, we can ask you a question from one of the viewers. They asked. No worries, no worries. Do your thing. All right. Let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
All right, perfect. So one of the viewers have asked, how would VR enhance the experience of your project with Flix?
Yeah, I actually typed this. I typed an answer in the chat. I think like basically, what was this? What was I thinking when I answered it? Yeah, I mean, for as far as the actual viewing experience, I think that VR cinemas have sort of covered that shared environment sort of thing. I guess you would be looking to integrate like the more community-based sort of social media type stuff that Flix would have into the actual VR platform, and maybe like combine the two in creating a more like holistic um, uh, movie sharing, community building type thing. Yeah.
Okay, for sure, for sure. Okay, that's cool. I hope that answers your question. We forgot what the username was, but I hope it answered it. And now we can move on to Larry. Larry, are you here? A little Dora the Explorer check.
Yep, I'm here.
Perfect. Larry, we have a question for you, straight from the source. This gentleman or gentlewoman has asked you, could you merge this with a Pokemon type experience? I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm guessing maybe capturing certain pictures or doodles.
Yeah. Yeah, I think definitely the AR experience could be expanded to include things other than just posting. My hope for this was, if it were to be manufactured, is that it would also be able to be used post-COVID when people were back in school and were back to being able to be in the yellow staircase physically again. How can we use the augmented reality to make it a more interactive space as well? So I think I understand kind of what they mean with the Pokemon Go example, but yeah, that sort of gamification could absolutely be included into it.
I think that's really sick. Sorry, 1 second here. So we actually have questions for all the designers. General question for everyone. Feel free to ask more questions in the chat below. Anything you're interested in, prior projects, or curious about other projects earlier on, or just curious about the designers themselves. Feel free to ask us any questions. We are more than happy to answer them. And if we don't, I don't know. We'll just move on to the next question. But we'll probably answer most of your questions.
Yeah, so we actually have some questions prepared in case so that the chat can get their minds thinking and start dropping questions. So we can start with one of these questions we have here. How has your creative process changed, if at all, due to the pandemic?
Now anyone is free to jump in.
Yeah.
I will give them a quick minute to think here. For me, my way of changing is probably material, Kemwell. I think mostly just material is the biggest thing for me. Without, because you used to have, an OCAD, we have access to the wood shop, plastic shop, metal shop, and we had like really kind of like God in a way, where we have full creative freedom to touch any material, manipulate any material we want. Kind of like the Avatar, the last Airbender, right? We just boom, right there, bend it to our will. That's one thing I really miss. So for me, I really had to make prototypes and then kind of texturize by coloring or adding texture to it to really try to mimic what I wanted the material to be like.
Right. I think it's my take of it at least is it's a very different experience, when you're trying to practice some of the things we've taken from our in class and at school practices and lessons versus like trying to translate it in a space where resources that we're pretty comfortable and aware of that are available to us at school are not actually available to us in the same way. So being able to adapt, I think, is what I've learned to bring to the table as a designer. And I think that's something we would typically understand at the beginning, but based on our circumstances, I think it's pushed us to move in that mindset more too.
I think that ties in well with the subject once again, that idea of adaptivity. I can say personally, I found it interesting and actually beneficial that faculty and the project tailored itself, or at least allowed the opportunity for digital intervention, or directly addressing what the changes in the real world associated with distancing could have on a design intervention. And like you can see with Natasha's project, that didn't have to take digital direction. It just seems that for many of us, and it might have been an interest in exploring it for the first time that led to digital sort of products. But yeah, I think that's something that changed in the process for me.
I think.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, yeah. I guess with all of us working from home, like it was really great working on the exhibition with everyone. But I really miss just like walking around like the 5th or 6th floor and just seeing what people are doing. Like definitely like going back and forth with like the workshops and like, getting some advice on things. But also like I found that like, like when I got stuck on a project, I would just sort of wander around OCAD or I'd like wander around Chinatown, and it would help clear my head. And now that I'm at home, it's not super safe to like wander around. It's like I'm just sort of like sitting there with my thoughts, and you definitely have to take a lot of initiative to like contact people and be like, hey, can you like check my project out? Do you have any like critique? So it's not as convenient, but we're making do.
Kind of to build off of that, I think that something that we all experience is like, we don't have the ability to kind of like walk around and brainstorm and riff off each other, spitball. Like we have to go to the internet to get like all of our information normally anyways, but like there's less of that conversation built around it unless it's in these structured class contexts that we do online, or you take the initiative to talk. And so I think that informs a lot of our work, because we're presented now with a world of product and a world of products that already exists. And how does mine compare? How am I changing it from this other thing that's already out there? Am I just adding more, especially in the digital sense? Before we were concerned with, are we adding garbage to the landfill? Like, are we just adding another thing out into this space that, this ethereal thing that sits above us? Is anyone going to download it? Is it going to be purchased? And so I think that we've really had to look at ourselves with an incredibly critical lens and say, what am I making here? How am I going to defend it? And should this be portfolio work, or should this be something I want to pursue? Like, how am I really going to mine this to make it comparable to the glut of what we've encountered through our ethnography, through just Googling one word and doing a scan? It's like, okay, don't need to do that, already exists.
I guess for me, it changed because I went back home to Mexico. So I see everything with a different lens now. And I think it's like so different having your projects for example, in Canada, and how they really like change your perspective when you're like in a different culture where you study. So I find it really interesting, and it helps me like explore more ideas that I'm not used to.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for answering those questions. Jacqueline has a question for everyone. Anyone can free to answer. If not, it's all good. What has been one learning experience during design for health, especially since we all did it digitally? I'll get started first just to warm up the conversation. I think I learned that even without physically being there, because I know in Randy's class for Design for Health, we would actually be in the hospital and see and really take in what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. And we will design off that. And I feel like with today's technology, it kind of surprises me how you can deeply relate with someone's problem just through what they're writing, and just a quick call, a quick chat or interview. You can really just learn a lot from them without actually being there next to them to observe.
Yeah, it's also oh, it's also interesting that I think in the wake of COVID and us all being separate and not being able to have the typical design for health class experience, it really did highlight the fact that there's so many different aspects to consider for health. Like health is not just one thing that you can check a box, yes or no, you are healthy or you are not. Um, like there's mental health, there's physical health, there's like your relationships, little things you do play into your health. And so it was really interesting seeing how with COVID and with this like all-encompassing pandemic that we all have to worry about, how we were able to focus on little aspects of health that might not be considered like your standard medical health.
I think one thing is also that we're working in kind of a system where like we're designing for health, we're designing to make sure that, like with mental health, that they're maintaining it, that, that we're in a pandemic, that they're keeping safe, but that there's a definite lifespan to it where we either see our project being phased out because the conditions will no longer be present because we're working towards a solution, or that that our project is going to be working towards like a better solution, that we will be a society that values the maintainment of mental health, so we'll be able to better self-regulate. So I don't know, I don't think I've ever when you think of products and product design, it's like you think of like a life cycle, but you never sort of think about the lifespan and how long it will be relevant for. And I think design for health really made me sort of look at my projects in that aspect.
I think, taking into consideration, building off of Michelle makes this great point. It's like, what does sustainability really mean? Like, can we sustain the action? Is there growth? Is there a way to, I think this was talked about in Begum's work, something about like procedurally generate our own growth in this object through, if people are subscribing, if there's something happening there that then allows this better solution to thrive. And I think that's something that we've all really had to consider. You had said that like we have this ability now to kind of get a good sense of somebody just through talking to them online, which is surprising. And I think that when we remove that, the awkwardness of interacting, like there is kind of like this ability to kind of open up more maybe, or like you're willing to disclose, especially within the parameters that we're all living in, the restrictions. It's like you want to tell somebody your experience, you want to be heard, you need that validation of your experience. And so we have that, and we're trying to solution for these things and looking at it sustainably in the future. It's like, am I solving for something that pre-existed COVID, that was exacerbated by the pandemic, and that will extend whether or not I can go out and hug a stranger tomorrow safely? Am I still going to live with some of the implications or some like residual that's left from the current moment? And so, yeah, thinking about sustainability as a project has been, and what that means is a change in the learning process, and also what vocabulary am I equipped with and what am I giving to the world so that we can then continue to design for the future. Like it's the way that we understand ourselves and orient ourselves within the world, how we share this language. Does our design communicate something that is necessary? Is it a new story? Is it a new language for the next generation to build off of and build on?
Building on that, I think one thing I learned is, and I think is evident in most of these projects, is building very compound products that address various levels of humanity, I think. So, and that can be both physical, and we looked at cognitive behavior, and we look at well-being as well. And I think creating services, products, and experiences that bridge those was something that I think Design for Health really brought forward. I also saw in the chat here, there's a question asking what are some tips we would give to future design for health students. Maybe I'd just start off by saying start broad and look at or invest in your interests, like use that as a starting point. Yeah, for subject matter.
For that, just I think focusing on the user you want to solve on and be, I think, very specific on this user and like kind of like the one in a million user, which when you solve for that, you can solve for almost everyone.
Not that that has to be the requirement, though. I think solving for everyone is.
I mean, that's what Angelica kept saying to me. Like, if you specify more your user into a more like extreme thing, it can solve all problems that include a large amount of people.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that ties into this concept of micro macro too, in a different way, because if you look at somebody's specific needs, like hyper specific, there are larger implications within that can be extrapolated. If maybe I can expand on what you were offering.
I can synthesize on those two. It is very much like hone into what your personal interests are, because you're only going to give 200% to something you believe in. And chances are too, if you're living an experience related to those things, as we saw with Daniel's project, like there's probably a large amount of people out there in the billions who are kind of like you. And then from that, you can specify a user who maybe isn't exactly you. You're not just designing for yourself, you're designing for somebody who shares an experience with you, and you want to bridge that gap. How do I bring to them and they bring to me this thing? And there's this convergent point between undefined user that you are researching, your own understanding, and really taking that and being honest about it. Like, don't do things. I think this is something that like we all have a tendency to do, is to post rationalize or to idealize this thing because we're like, oh, this is great, I'm so in it, this is the thing that I want to do, I believe in it, I've done all the confirmation bias research, I've done just enough of the critical assessment that it looks like, you know, like we do these things because we believe in ourselves. But I think like really understanding that there is somebody on the other end of the spectrum and you want to converge, and that's where you're going to rain down and hit all those people who exist in between, is a really great way to approach design from a point of passion, but also from a point of empathy.
I agree with all those points you guys said. I think it's fantastic. A little bit off of that, where I feel for future students who are taking the design course, I feel time management is very important. If you should manage your time, because the time will fly by pretty quickly, especially if you're still like research and expanding your research broadly. And one thing I can give you guys a good tip on is, even if you are like, you have to move forward with your project, right? Even if you're doing research and you're not too sure about it, have a little confidence in your research and yourself as a designer to be able to adapt. Maybe this, when you research something, you hit a wall, it's like, oh, maybe this doesn't apply with what I wanted and what I hoped for. But at that very moment, you don't be afraid to pivot and be like, oh, from this research, it actually inspired a whole different set of research that led me to this conclusion. One of the students had that kind of system, and I thought it worked out really well for his project when he presented it in class. And yeah.
Is there another question prepared, or?
For sure, there is many questions we can ask. Right now, next question is, design is often very collaborative. How were you able to work around being quite distant from your peers?
Thanks, all us, right? Well, I think like the fact that like we are all like now in digital having FaceTime together, I think in my opinion it has made this team collaboration work actually a lot better, because like when we were back in school before COVID, it was like, and when we were doing like group works, it was typically an ideal thing that we meet up together, like on the weekends. It was sort of not in our mind that, oh, we go online and chat together, but instead it would like we come to school at a certain time. We meet at this time, and then we do the project for this amount of hour.
but now it's just it may be considered overworking, but there is a lot of flexibility in time. And then you just meet up. Hey, like you send a message to your group, like, do you want to meet up? Do you want to meet up now and do the collaboration now? Oh yeah, that works. So yeah, there's a lot of flexibility from my experience of COVID education, but yeah.
Perfect. Anyone else want to add on top of that?
I'd be curious to know, I guess, Deanna and Stanley, you kind of talked about it briefly already, but you guys are the only group in this group. Were there tools or like ways around group work that you really relied on for collaboration?
Sorry, do you want to start, Stanley?
What did you mean by like tools?
Well, I mean, like, I think what stood out to me in that question is collaboration. And I feel like maybe there were digital software, or I don't know, like,
I think we just like hung out on Teams. Like sometimes you just need to like just have a meeting where you're just both working, or like you work with other people, and then you can kind of simulate that like big desk at OCAD where you're just like riffing on ideas and stuff. I think that helps a lot. Other than that, I guess like with
sorry.
I was gonna say XD is kind of collaborative, but it kind of crapped out on us like within like the last day that we needed it to work. But it worked out at the end. But that's why we like stayed up all night.
We almost worked on 2 separate projects just because we had 2 different stakeholders. Like we were working towards the same thing, and we'd always like check in, but we had our own tasks delegated within that. But I mean, just in general, a good tool this term has been Miro I think for everyone. Like every class has used it, and it's really mimicked the in-class like brainstorming experience, and maybe even made it easier because you don't have to write on a sticky note and then take it to the wall.
But the sticky note can contain like not a limited amount of characters, or it can contain an image,
or an image or a website or a video. Yeah. Totally.
Perfect. Yeah, I have to say, Miro definitely held it down. It's in the chat for anyone's curious. It is a whiteboard collaborative tool. I think it's very pog. I think it's very cool. It makes collaborating a lot easier and brainstorming a lot easier. Dare say even better, because like everything's done for you, because you don't have to draw circles or anything. Before that, does anyone add on to that last question? No. Okay, so we have the next question with, what larger conversation does this project and your proposed solution contribute to? I guess this is for anyone with their own projects, what it speaks out to.
I'm going to speak to like the assignment on the whole part, because it was presented to us as something that was very broad, and we had a lot of play as a self-directed project. Like, what do we want to focus on? How can we defend that standpoint? How can we make it meaningful in terms of health? And I think just to speak broadly with this is like, health encompasses so much, and what we can design. I think we looked at these things that were maybe like, forms of play or forms of communication or whatever, and how that relates back to this large thing that is no longer just tied to like an experience of your own well-being or confidence in your well-being, be it somebody living with disability, living in isolation, living through trauma or argument or whatever, that it then permeates into all these other different worlds. And so I think that what all of our designs have presented, and what this kind of project presents, is an opportunity to look at health holistically, to understand how something that maybe isn't even necessarily tied to a specific condition or experience can maybe tie back to that in a different way or adapt. And I think that's something that we see with like gamification of absolutely anything. Like, in economics, in health, in education, whatever. So I think what we've learned is that no matter what we design, we do have we have an impact. We are giving people the tools to interact with their world, to experience their experience, and really understand what that impact means. So I think that, you know, overall, like everything that we do as designers is involved in a bigger conversation, and we have to take ownership over that and then tie it back to what we're doing and know, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. So
perfect. Wow, thank you, Natasha. Oh, sorry, go on. You want to add something?
I think to build on that, and also referring back to the question before, you could pretty much make anything related to health, because like health is pretty much existing right now. So like whatever you're interested in, like it has some correlation to your health in some way or another. So like don't be afraid to just like explore topics you're interested in and then like reframe it within health, because you'll always find that there are passages.
Now 9,000%. And with that, we are going to be wrapping up. If you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you, everyone, and all the viewers, all the chatters. We really, really appreciate it. We love the pod. We love the conversation. We loved everything, and I hope you guys loved it too. So here at Macro Micro, you can see all our projects and in detail at the website right there, micro-macro.format.com, or follow the designers all on at micromacro.ocad on Instagram. What a mouthful. Very, I was like, all right.
Just from everyone at Micro Macro, we would like to thank our hosts for today, Kemuel and Wilson, as well as our supporting professors, Angelica and Rani, and OCAD University, Design Toronto Festival, as well as everyone who came out to watch and support our work today. Thank you so much.
And thank you for enduring our little hiccup at the beginning, but an extra big thank you to Wilson for hosting the live stream and having it work out so well. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you to Kemuel as well for being my co-host. Really helped out. We work well
Thank
together.
you, Wilson. Thank you for joining me on this extravagant project event. I think it was one heck of a ride.
Yeah. That's my king, baby. That's my king. Anyways,
oh my.
We're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming. We had so much fun. Until next year, catch us again. Maybe another live stream, maybe in person. It could be even more fun. And I guess everyone, if you could all unmute and say bye together, and just wave. 3, 2, 1. Bye.